in. Thank you.
Jones?
Present.
Crosco?
Present.
Jimenez?
Present.
Morales?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. And I apologize, I didn't say what it was. This is our Public Safety, Finance, and Strategic Support Committee meeting today on November 19th. And if you're participating with us via Zoom, you can use the raise hand function to join in if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. And then if you're joining us on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or excuse me, yep, *9, I believe. And then we will move into our work plan. We have no items being recommended to be dropped or deferred. And I typically take a vote on this. Is that necessary? If it's not necessary, I will cease to do it, but I understood that it was. So I'll ask maybe Danielle.
Yes, Councilmember, it would be good to take a motion and a vote on the work plan.
Okay, I'll keep doing it then. So we have no items being recommended to be dropped or deferred. And if there's no changes, then from my colleagues, if we can get a motion to accept the work plan.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Jones, or Vice Mayor Jones, and a second from Councilmember Arenas. We can get a roll call vote, please.
Jones?
Oh, I'm sorry. If you can pause
Arenas?
for a second there, Tony, if you don't mind pausing.
Sure.
I do think we have someone raising their hand. I don't know if they're calling for this item, but I'll go and check. So to caller with the last 4 digits of 5140. Again, this is on our work plan, and you have 2 minutes. And you have to press *6 to unmute. And you're still muted.
Am I unmuted?
You are now unmuted.
Yeah, is this the part about I'm unclear on the agenda. Is this the part regarding the new traffic enforcement that there's going to, the new traffic cops they want to hire?
No, this is not that item. That
What
will come up
item?
later.
Okay, well, yeah, great. You guys just, yeah, I'll call back for that one. I'm sorry.
Great, thank you. Okay, sorry. Now we can go back to the vote. Thanks, Tony.
Arenas? Arenas? I'll come back because I see her name there. Jones?
Aye.
Crosco?
Aye.
Jimenez?
Aye.
Morales?
Aye.
Going back to Arenas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to our consent calendar. And if we can get a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we do have Blair Beekman that wishes to speak on consent. So we'll go over to Blair.
Hi, I had a procedural question as well. Is this does the consent have the item about the monthly financial report?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good. So yeah, I have public comment on this. Can you start the timer over again? Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. You know, I've been attending the Federated Retirement Board meetings lately, and they've talked about, they offered an interesting notion that they may not be the idea of inflation may not be such an important numbers in the next year, and they may not figure into their formulas. You know, don't quote me on that, but that's how I heard and understood things. there was debate and controversy about that, but nonetheless, that I think what was presented. I put that to mean maybe that can have some effect on the COLA ideas for the POA for the upcoming year. And maybe that means, it's my goal that we may not have to rely on COLA funding in the next year. So, and we can put it off for at least a year for the POA. With a minute left, thank you for your time. To still practice how to try to offer a good-minded public service announcement, I hope at this point in mid-November, we're all becoming clear that even as the vaccine process seems to be developing in many parts of the world at this time, there still may be an expected rise in COVID-19 cases throughout the winter. I thought this would tie into the financial ideas a bit. And that we're going to have to work hard so that the previous 90 to 100 deaths a week across the SF Bay Area may only grow to a minimum amount of 100 to 30 to 140 a week during this fall and winter. A thank you to the VTA that is now making an important mission to have access available, much more access available on regular bus routes. And please continue to use safe and cautious practices. And please consider also, with in some 7 seconds, that the school year may not be starting in January 2021, and we have to wait till the fall. I think we'll still be done possibly by 2020.
Okay, I did have one question for staff on this, and this is actually on the outstanding debt, and then our write-off of it. We had a couple large figures, namely from marijuana business tax assessment and businesses that were no longer operating, and I guess now we can't locate responsible parties, but there was pretty significant dollars. One, $373,000 for YB Amber Pearl, another $728,000 for Fortune Wellness, and then a gentleman by the name of Hung Lam, who shows up several times on the list. I'm wondering if it's the same individual, and if it is, his total was up over $133,000. And so I see, a number of these, kind of looking at the reasons why we're writing them off, and understand we do this year over year. These ones just seemed rather significant, and I didn't know if it was something that was worthwhile of trying to continue to collect on that, even if it's investigations of sorts from kind of taking a deeper dive to try and see if we couldn't locate these individuals or their assets, and so just wanted to hear from staff in that regard with some of these big sums.
Yes, Chair. This is Rick Bruno. I'm the Deputy Director in the Finance Department, responsible for the Revenue Management team. Regarding these accounts for write-off, so one, I just want to note that even if we were able to locate these individuals, the statute of limitations has passed on them. So if we were to locate them, we were to bring them to court, we really wouldn't have any case to stand on. This goes back to the time when there were many marijuana businesses operating in the city. The police department worked really hard from an enforcement standpoint to regulate these businesses and get them to the point where there's only 16 that are registered and are compliant today. So as we, when these came about, not only were we trying to enforce and regulate these businesses, we also used mechanisms to assess. So that these were tax assessments, and they were really rough estimates at the point of trying to determine how much cannabis sales were happening at each of these locations. And we would take a very conservative perspective in estimating what their sales would be. So we would actually have them listed at a large markup of sales in respect to trying to bring them into compliance. And at that point, by issuing tax assessments, a number of businesses decided to close on their own, and that was one of the objectives of the city in bringing these businesses into compliance. So while the amounts are really large, the amounts might be overstated in terms of what was actually owed to the city. And so I'll just kind of share a little bit of that background in terms of some of those larger marijuana write-offs that we're bringing forward.
Okay, great. That is helpful. And I see caller with the last four digits, 5140, did raise their hand. We can go to them and then we'll take the vote.
Yeah, I find it a little bit odd that you guys are trying to make money off of potheads. I mean, you know what's going to happen. They're going to burn you every single time. And if you really want the revenue from them, you have to have somebody in there all the time doing tallies. And I can't understand why there's a statute of limitations. I wish that was the same for, minor driving offenses or an open container. You guys really come down hard on people with that. And you want to have even more traffic cops on the street. And, why don't you guys do a better job at trying to collect the revenue? I mean, there isn't one person in the entire city that can't go down to these stores and do an audit? I don't believe it. And if you want your pensions to be fat and you need money for the city, you people need to get down there. I don't understand it. You should have an inspector in there all day long if you want the revenue. But these people can just walk away scot-free. I call BS on that. I think you guys are lazy and you don't even care about the money that is falling from the sky from this marijuana tax. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves, and you should really be ashamed of yourselves for collecting revenue for traffic fines. And I can't wait to speak about how you guys want to hire 6 more police officers. It's disgusting. The city is pathetic. You guys should all be ashamed of yourselves. And if you can't collect tax revenue from marijuana, I want to know what else you can't do. It's probably a lot. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Now we'll go to the vote.
Arenas,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Crosco,
Aye.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Morales.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're on to a regular agenda. Item D1, our first one, the Police Department Operations and Performance Bi-Monthly Status Report. And welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Welcome.
All right, let me share my
I believe we
screen.
have our acting assistant chief, Dave Tyndall.
All right, I'll be doing the presentation for Acting Assistant Chief Tyndall. My name's Steve Donahue. I'm the commander of the Research and Development Unit, and I want to make sure you can see my screen here, Councilmember Morales. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you, Lieutenant Donahue.
Excellent. All right. So I'm the commander of the Research and Development Unit of the San Jose Police Department, and today I'll be presenting the department's bi-monthly operations performance status report. Today we will be covering citywide crime statistics, sexual assault strategy update, emerging issues particularly regarding our traffic enforcement unit staffing, and then afterwards we will be available for any questions you might have. First, we're going to begin with our citywide UCR Part 1 crime statistics. On the screen in front of you, we have significant reductions in rapes and robberies as compared to the same period last year, with a 10% reduction in rapes and a 12% reduction in robberies. In addition, robberies are also at a 12% reduction from the 5-year average. These contributed to a 6% drop in violent crime compared to the same period last year. And when we look at property crimes, we see larceny having a significant reduction of 13%. Now, while vehicle thefts are up 8% compared to the same period last year, they're still down 4% compared to the 5-year average. And this, coupled with the 3% reduction in burglaries, contributes to a 6% drop in property crimes compared to the same period last year. So we're going to move on to our sexual assault strategy update. Looking at this slide, we see, when we look at this period compared to the same period last year, we see reductions in attempted sexual assaults, rape, sodomy, oral copulation, and penetration with a foreign object. However, we see a significant increase in spousal rape and domestic rape. Apologize, I shouldn't have moved. we looked at this, and I spoke about it at the council meeting on Tuesday, but this is likely attributable to our intersectionality tool I talked about, where we're now seeing sexual assaults that are being reported historically based on officers investigating domestic violence incidents and asking the victims there if they've been ever been sexually assaulted. We move forward and we look at the sexual assault strategy work items implementation status. There's no update. I know my predecessor, Lieutenant Cook, talked about this in the last time he presented 2 months ago to the committee. There hasn't been any change in the actual statuses of the events at this point. However, there's been progress made on the events. So when we look at the work items, we still have the same implementation of the items in green, in progress in blue, and pending in red. And when we look at the countywide work items, it's going to be the same. They were implemented in green, in progress in blue, and pending in red. So when we talk about this upcoming sexual assault work plan items, what's going to happen is we're going to be presenting in February Lieutenant Jaime Jimenez of the Sexual Assault Investigations Unit. He's the commander of the unit. He's going to be presenting on sexual assault statistics broken out month to month and year to date as requested by Councilmember Arenas. And then in the following month, in March, Lieutenant Jimenez again will be providing his annual update on sexual assault statistics, trends, and any measurable outcomes we've had. And finally, also in March, we'll be presenting on duty manual updates related to sexual assault and domestic violence, focusing on improving our interactions with the survivors and other vulnerable populations. And now I will pass the presentation to Lieutenant David Naya of the Traffic Enforcement Unit, who will speak about the staffing levels and direction of traffic enforcement. Dave?
Can you hear me, Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So this first slide is just discusses the direction from council back in February of 2020 and the request to prepare an MBA and discuss the staffing options of the traffic enforcement unit. At that time, they were looking at redeployment and possible ways to increase staffing within the unit, and also looking at deployment at different hours and specifically for nights and weekends when TEU is not on duty and when we see a high volume of fatal crashes throughout the city. The updated staffing plan was prepared for the recent T&E committee and also today's meeting. Due to the COVID issues, the MBA was not prepared. However, I'm here today with Assistant Chief Tyndall to provide information about our staffing model and current deployment and where we look to be here in the years coming. But we will return in spring of 2021 with an update on our current traffic enforcement unit. Next slide, Steve. So this slide, if you can direct your attention to, please, is the current TEU staffing model and our current deployment. So just to give you an idea of where we are and what we look at historically in the unit, we are currently budgeted for 31 positions in TEU. Of those 31 positions, 16 of them are filled, and they're filled in the fashion listed below with 1 lieutenant, that's myself. We have 12 enforcement positions, which include 1 sergeant and 11 officers. And then under the umbrella of TEU, we have 3 special events team people, and that includes 1 sergeant and 2 officers. If you look at the slide to the right, it shows how we deploy those 12 enforcement positions. So they're deployed in 1 team, again, 1 sergeant and 11 officers. They work Monday through Thursday, and their typical hours are 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Next slide. This slide refers to daily traffic patterns within the city of San Jose. And we look at this as if you look at each one is delineated by the day, and then it also goes down by the time of each day. And when we see our peak traffic patterns within the city. Our current deployment, as indicated off to the left there, is 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And then the daily traffic patterns are just one of the things we take into consideration when we look at deployment with our TEU personnel. So you'll see some spikes in the morning hours, as we all know, during a morning commute, and we see the spikes during the afternoon and evening hours with the evening commute. One of the things that the traffic patterns don't take into account are what we see when we have school in session during non-COVID times. So what we see is an increase in the morning commute area for children who are on the streets, either walking to street or biking to walking to school or biking to school, I should say. And then again in the afternoon commute when they are leaving school and they're biking and walking home. So Those peaks are usually 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and then we see that peak again rise from 2:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. And that's one of the reasons why we deploy the unit in the way we do right now, with that 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Deployment to maximize our efforts with the schools in the morning, and also get a full piece of that morning commute, and then a partial piece of that afternoon commute before we go off duty for the day. Next slide. This next slide is similar to the last slide, but it shows a seven-day window here, so you can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. Again, you see the peaks through the week on Monday through Friday. Then you see a dramatic drop off on the red line there for our weekend traffic around the streets of San Jose. And then if you go look at the the blue line, that shows those high peaks and low valleys. That is showing our average traffic congestion in 2019, which would have been during non-COVID times. So it gives you kind of a comparison, so you can see the two and what we're looking at today versus we're looking at in a typical day in the city of San Jose. Next slide. So our current enforcement on nights and weekends, and one of the things we're looking at for deployment and or redeployment is looking at nights and weekends, and when we do have those high numbers of fatalities on our roadways. So one thing I want to draw your attention to is that all officers in the city of San Jose are traffic enforcement officers. So what I mean by that is that officers that are working on patrol during free patrol time are expected to go out on the streets and enforce traffic violations, whether they're minor traffic or vehicle code violations on the streets. And they're out there issuing citations as well, just as regular traffic enforcement officers are during their day-to-day schedule. Some of the things that patrol participates in that you may not be aware of are we do racing enforcement details, or what we refer to internally as a red op. We do enforcements on sideshow details, and patrol is also involved in a lot of our grant operations that we run through the traffic enforcement unit. Some of those ideas on the grant operations are DUI enforcement. We also do saturation cards for DUIs. We do a thing called Know Your Limit, traffic enforcement on the streets. We do distracted driving things. We do motorcycle enforcement, click it or ticket, and some of the things that are associated to our grant operations. We also work hand in hand with DOT. A classic example of that is right now we're doing a campaign called Fight the Spike, and that is for the driving during darkness and the time change with that we see with the turning our clocks back here for daylight savings. Next slide. So to give you an idea of, again, where we are and where we look to go, our current model is, again, 1 team, 1 sergeant, 11 officers, Monday through Thursday, 6 to 4. And that's what you see there on the left. And what we look to accomplish here in the next year or two is a 2-team model. And we'd like to get the staffing up in the unit to 1 sergeant. Again, 2 teams now, so you can essentially double this. So it's 2 sergeants and 16 officers. The way we would split that is a day shift team to mirror the same hours that we have now. And that's 1 sergeant, 8 officers, Monday through Thursday, 6 to 4. And that's what you see there in the blue. And then in the yellow or orange, you see a second team with 1 sergeant, 8 officers. That would be a Tuesday through Saturday deployment, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., which is a modified swing shift to get officers on the streets, traffic enforcement officers specifically on the streets during those evening hours. Next slide. So in conclusion, what our next steps are and how we look to continue to push this down through as we move on and as we grow as a department to that 2-team staffing model is our goal. Once we have street-ready officers on the street to fill our vacancies, and the estimated timeline to potentially do that is 1 to 2 years. As officer positions become available, we're going to fill vacancies as needed in our patrol division and the Bureau of Investigations to improve our response times and also meet the investigative needs of the department, but also look to deploy resources back into our traffic enforcement unit as we can and as bodies become available. So what we've done in preparation for expansion of the unit is we have procured equipment, motorcycles, LiDAR devices, and things of that nature to accommodate the expansion of the unit when those vacancies are filled. So as we're able to fill those vacancies with manpower, we will have the equipment in place. So it is a seamless transition as we bring new officers into the unit. And then in advance of the next March shift change, we're going to look at the TU staffing, and if we need to shift start times better to cover evolving traffic patterns, we'll do that. And these are things that we look at quite frequently with myself and Chief Tyndall to look at our deployment, see if we are in fact maximizing our efforts on the streets with officers and getting them out at the right times to essentially, and for lack of a better term, get the most bang for our buck out while they're out on the streets. And then in conclusion, the department will report back to this committee in the spring with a status update on where we are, not only with staffing, but if we have made any changes to our current deployment and or hours in which we do deploy. And I believe that concludes our presentation. And if there are any questions regarding staffing, overall deployment, Chief Tyndall's here as well to answer any global type department staffing questions. And then between him and I, we can answer any questions as well with regards to specifics on the traffic unit.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll go over to our public first, and I'll come back to my colleagues. So let's go to caller with the last four digits, 5140.
Yeah, I'd like to know where all this money fell out of the sky to get more traffic officers. I really find it irritating that where I live, it can take an hour for a cop to come out for a call, but there's never a shortage of someone at Bryan and Cherry waiting for somebody to roll through a stop sign. So I want to know one thing. No one can answer this question. I hope you guys can. Where did all this money come to hire more traffic officers? By the way, traffic court is closed indefinitely. So if you think your guys are going to start doing your quotas and your revenuing and giving people the fat fines that you guys used to love to give, you're not going to be able to get them because the court's closed. Well, actually, it's open online for payment only, which is, that's not proper justice as far as I'm concerned. It's not due process either. But that's what traffic's all about. It's about tyranny. It's not about safety. It's about gold bricking, and it's about justifying your high salaries and your existence to do absolutely nothing but destroy people's driving records and to humiliate them and to play the big role like you guys are really doing something and you're not. You two cops down there who are giving this presentation, you should be ashamed of yourselves. You guys make fat salaries. You never get tickets, do you? You just flash your badge and you drive away. You guys don't come out for proper calls. You have you're gonna have bankers' hours to give traffic tickets. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. We need people here between midnight and 6 a.m. when cars get stolen. You see how many cars are stolen? That's up, isn't it? Home break-ins are down. Why? Because everybody's home because they're locked in their houses thanks to all these stupid rules from the city and the state and the county and soon to be from Joe Biden. So I don't even know how you're going to even collect revenues if we're not even allowed to drive our.
Now we'll move on to Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you. It sounds like there can be a year before this program is fully implemented, and hopefully within the next year, there can be some time to negotiate for the number of police officers and the technology that may be asked for this project. With new 4G and 5G that will also include much surveillance and data collection tech for Vision Zero and neighborhood safety needs, open, accountable public practices can help with responsibility, better reasoning, and more open democratic practices that can help better define how to bridge the digital divide. And more generally work towards pre-COVID-19 ideas of long-term community harmony, sustainability, and ideas of peace. Accountability and open public policy ideas for technology can also help with important new questions of demilitarization and how to begin to reduce the prison, military, industrial state. This is openly naming our better ideas and practices. I really hope we can line it up and get it together and learn how to speak about, how to better speak about important new KSI statistics that use the good concepts of equity, but that may enlarge current KSI numbers when comparing to previous years. To conclude, as I've been trying to politely offer in the past few months, I feel Anthony Mata would be a very good police chief to help move San Jose forward into a new generation of these sorts of questions, and should certainly be considered as a very good example of how to choose the next police chief of San Jose. With 25 seconds, to really line ourselves up on how to work on the future of KSI numbers, so we're not exaggerating the numbers. That's an important goal, I feel. That may be the only important goal I can work on really at this time. I hope we can negotiate things, but to work on the KSI numbers so we know what we're working on with equity now compared to our previous years, that's an important distinction to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. Right now, we'll go over to my colleagues, and I see Councilmember Jimenez has his hand up.
Thank you so much. I just have a few questions. The first one is just given all the statistics that are presented in this bi-monthly status report, I'm wondering if any of the officers can answer this. And I know it's I guess an opinion to a certain extent, but I hope it's maybe based in some of the statistics that we see. But what I'm curious about is if you had to share with the residents in one sentence sort of what the state of crime or public safety is in the city, what would you say that is? And that's for anyone. I don't know who wants to answer it. I know it's a broad question.
Hey, Councilmember Jimenez, this is Acting Assistant Chief Dave Tyndall. I'll take a stab at it. I think it's a hard one to answer, directly because, I mean, certainly when we look at the stats and certainly when we look at the trends that are going on right now, it's really hard to comment on the state when, while we're in the middle of a pandemic and when, things are opening and closing, and because we certainly see those spike up and down. I think traditionally we see spikes at certain times of the year on different types of crime. And I also think that we see, trends up and down based on what is going on, within our community. So I'd say from a pandemic standpoint, we've certainly seen, the trends for the most part have been trending downwards, with the exception of some of our property crimes. I know we talked about commercial burglaries. I know we talked about schools and the likes of that, where essentially as businesses are closed down, they become targets. And then we're seeing more of an uptick in crime when it relates to, some of the aggravated assaults are down, but we're certainly seeing those trending up now. I will say, and it's a startling statistic, but we're certainly seeing more guns on the streets than we have ever seen before. To the point of, I know we pulled the stats recently, and we'll do a end of year one, but we're now up, it's about 49.97% in gun seizures right now. And those are guns that are actually seized as part of evidence, not ones that are taken as, for safekeeping or any of that stuff. And that is, it's jumped almost 200, I think to date, over 200 plus guns that our patrol officers and our special operations and our investigations are taking off. So, I mean, the trend lines are kind of, for the most part, trending down, but we're certainly see as things are opening up, the crime starting to move up with it, and definitely specific towards some of our gang issues and some of our weapons calls.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And just I have a few other questions, but a question related to something you said specifically about the gun seizures. Are we, or as you as a department, doing anything differently that you think may be leading to additional gun seizures, or just taking more guns off the street, or even just seeing that there's more out there?
Yeah, they will. I'll actually apologize because I know I just realized you said one sentence, and that was.
I know.
That was quite a bit. That was a bigger sentence than that I said. But
this is a complicated topic, and I listen.
So
my view of public safety, if you don't mind, just is that you can look at statistics, you can look at the way communities feeling. There is no. It seems to me, my opinion has been is that there is no single sort of measure for how we are doing in public safety. Different areas are different things. So I totally understand that it's a complicated answer. It's not a very easy one to just put forward. We're a safe city. I think we are, generally speaking, but we have our challenges, right? So I just wanted to say that. But go ahead.
And I think it's one of those things that's constantly evolving. And in regards to the guns, I mean, I think we're certainly seeing, and we have been working with both the county and even the city attorney's office on working with ATF, and even I know there's the lawsuit being filed. We're seeing ghost guns, a lot of ghost guns out there. And these are guns that are essentially being parted out and brought in from other states and then put together here. So I'd certainly say from that standpoint, While we see home residential burglaries are down, which is where a lot of guns end up from the street, just the accessibility from outside the state is certainly driving up the numbers. And I would certainly say that the proactive level of our police force with our young officers and our special operations investigations, they're really just turning over crimes and investigations that are yielding high volumes of guns.
Okay, thank you for that. The other question I had is related to slide 13. And I just want to better understand the TEU staffing, right? And so it says 31 positions, and obviously, if you look to the right of the slide, it says enforcement deployment. I think, I'm not a math major, but I think that's about 12 people or so. And so, and then the 2 model, I think, takes us to about 18 staff folks. And I think that was on another slide where we eventually want to go to. And so what I'm curious about is the 31 positions. Is that this, are we up to 31? Are we fully staffed, I guess, at 31? It seems to me, based on some statements, we're not, but how much of that gap exists, given sort of what we're allotted, given the budget and where we're currently as it relates to bodies?
So thank you for the question on that. So to put in perspective, and it's at the height of a TEU, I believe we had over 40 something positions total. And that's back when we had close to 1,400 officers. As we started downsizing specific units, there were positions that were left in units, basically essentially open PCN positions, we call them, which are personnel positions for individual bodies that go in there. So yes, there is obviously a math differential there as far as what is in that unit itself. And again, that's something that we're constantly assessing as far as really when we look at what department priorities, when we look at the community priorities and the city priorities, where can these positions best be served? We certainly know that we do need to bolster and are pushing towards bolstering our traffic enforcement unit. But some of these positions may ultimately also be pulled for other units and or priorities that come while we constantly assess that. So I think in that slide, we're showing essentially what we have now, what we'd like to go to, at least to get to a model where we can start handling nights and weekends. Because that truly is one of our goals, and we know it is for us right now, a blind spot, that we can't cover the evening commute. And a lot of the fatalities that we're seeing, or the KSI portions of it, we're seeing at nighttime. And we're certainly seeing, even during pandemic times, we've certainly seen speed go up. Anybody that drives on 101, I think, knows when cars are flying by them at 90, 100 plus miles an hour. As you have less people on the street, we see that. So certainly from a department standpoint, we know that we need to fill these positions, but we also have to do it based on priorities within the department that best serves our community.
Okay, and then can you help me understand the 3 special event team positions? I think in my mind I have an idea as to how that plays out. What are those special events, right? Is it like someone having an event where they're going to impact traffic, and hence some of these officers, those 3 officers there, or the 2 officers, right, get sent out to help with that traffic, or what, how does that?
So what they essentially do is they're part of the whole planning component. So whenever you have, let's say, a festival, or let's say we have a bicycle event, or we have a parade, dignitaries coming to town, political, all these different things, they're involved in the meetings from the get-go. They come up with essentially the strategic planning on the deployment model. So they're involved with OCA and any of the other type, either vendors or people that are responsible for it. So that truly is a full-time job, putting that out, coming up with the plans, deciding if secondary employment is going to be involved in it. We're going to put out CSOs, PTCOs, all those things. So it really is for special events that we have here at the city. As it stands right now, obviously we don't have a whole lot of that. So they're doing other things within traffic enforcement, mostly reporting out. We have a lot of DOJ reporting and pre-planning and all these other different things, but they're separated from the other enforcement positions because they're truly needed elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. And then getting to the end here, but I think there was I think on slide 16, it says all officers are traffic enforcement officers, which obviously I like and seems to make sense. I'm trying to think through just sort of the differences, right? Because I know speed, obviously, with Vision Zero and the city's attempt to reduce the number of fatalities all across the city. We know that speed tends to play a big role in fatalities, and and it is often sort of married to some of the actions from some of these folks doing the sideshows and things of that nature. And so radar training, right? I think there was a slide where it touched on, I think it's the LiDARs, right? The available, that you guys have available. My understanding, now I don't know if it's correct, I was talking to Captain Washburn, are there only about 4 LiDARs to check out currently?
No, I believe it's more than that. And Lieutenant Nye, can you speak to that?
And I think we're working on more, is my understanding, but.
Yeah, so we have currently for patrol officers to check out, we do have, there's 4 for them to check out. Every traffic enforcement officer is issued a specific LiDAR. But when we say we have 4, those are 4 per shift. It's on a rotational basis, so officers can check those out as needed. And something I'm working on with Captain Washburn and the remainder of the patrol captains as well is putting together classes to get officers certified in LiDAR. So we do have a few other LiDAR devices here in the traffic enforcement unit that we can issue out and put into service for our officers to check out if need be. And then also with grant funding that was just granted to us back here in October, we were approved through OTS to purchase 6 additional units. So we do have some in the pipeline, certainly, and we don't have a shortage necessarily right now. We have enough devices to issue out, but as we continue to train patrol officers in use of LiDAR, and we continue to grow the traffic unit, and we continue to push towards this enforcement model with our patrol officers, we're certainly going to need more equipment. So hopefully that paints a decent picture for you on that.
And so LiDAR is just radar, right? It's the radar gun that you see officers standing on the side of the road shooting at the cars, and right? Is that?
Yeah, I think for simplistic terms, yes. It's just a modern day version of radar. It's just a different type of a device. So yes.
Yeah, I understand. All right, and so officers, I mean, that seems to me to be maybe one critical way to stop speeding or slow speeding if folks know that someone's probably hanging out, taking their speed and potentially going to pull them over, right? Do you see this as a big part of the traffic enforcement unit? I'm trying to think of how important this is in your mind as it relates to the many things you all do, the sideshow detail, the grant, some of the other stuff.
But certainly the more officers we have on the street enforcing traffic, the better we are. So the more that we can prepare them and get them the training that they need and the equipment they need to accomplish that task is certainly something that we're not only looking into, but we have classes scheduled for, or we're looking to schedule a class here in December that we're going to put on. And due to COVID and things like that, we have limitations to the size of the class, but we're certainly going to fill that up with, I think, 15 officers to start. And then we're going to continue to work with the patrol division captains to identify officers who are interested in receiving that training and continue to push them on out into the field with those devices so we can utilize them to our advantage in enforcing the traffic laws.
Okay, and I suspect that as you get more officers trained, you're probably going to need more equipment, right?
Exactly. Yes, sir.
And then do you think that grant that you all applied for that you're I think got or are getting is going to be sufficient, or we're eventually going to have to address that somehow and how to fund some of that?
I think funding in the future, we're going to look to the grant funds as best we can moving forward, but certainly purchasing new devices as that comes into play. Yeah, we're as we expand the unit and as we expand the patrol, excuse me, I'm losing my connection here. As we expand the patrol function in getting them out as traffic enforcement officers too, we're going to need more equipment for sure.
Okay, and then the very last question I have is, how often are you all evaluating the traffic patterns? I obviously know, some of the data you presented show some of the recent evaluation, and I think you mentioned that, or someone mentioned that it's done periodically, and I'm just curious as to how often we do that to try to.
So the way we do it is we work directly with DOT, and DOT gives us their hotspot maps based on accidents, and so DOT looks at our reports. They also look at all of the Vision Zero corridors and how those are affected by traffic collisions. And then we deploy every month. We come up with a deployment model in the unit, which is dispersed out to the officers in briefing. And so they know exactly where we're having our highest concentration of collisions throughout the city. So that is done on a monthly basis with DOT and us internally. And then I typically look at those things as well as that month proceeds through, when I can look at the stats, and then we'll make adjustments accordingly and deploy the officers accordingly.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I'll just end by just saying, the reason I'm asking some of these questions is I suspect other council members can attest to the fact that a lot of the questions and comments and asks that we get from the residents are related to traffic enforcement type of things. And so that, this is important to the residents. And so that's why I was prying a little bit, but thank you for the answers. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. And Vice Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the report. I had a specific question around the sideshows. I've been in conversations with some of my peers in other cities, particularly Atlanta, and the council president in Atlanta, when asked what her #1 issue and concern right now, and her answer was sideshows, that they're being overwhelmed by sideshows. And I know that in the past, you updated us on sideshows, but it hasn't, in my mind, risen to crisis level. I could tell you that, driving around the city and even in my district, when you go to intersections and you see the skid mark circles in the intersection. So my question to you is, how prevalent are the sideshows? Is it becoming a bigger issue? And what are our strategies to address it?
And I can answer that question. Thank you for the question, council member. So just, from a global perspective, from the sideshow, and especially, and I wouldn't even use San Jose, I would use the Bay Area. What we see, and we certainly track sideshows both covertly and overtly, as far as where sideshows may occur. We know the hot spots, but what ends up happening with the hot spots is they know where we're watching, and so they end up moving, and it can not necessarily just move just in San Jose, but move over to a neighboring jurisdiction. I'll give you an example. Just this last weekend, there was information that was shared from another Bay Area agency on a group that was moving around, and this group even had people coming up from as far as Los Angeles, specifically for sideshows. So when you kind of look at that, where people are traveling that far to come up and partake in sideshows, I certainly think that it shows the trend on where that is. And there's communication between those and the sideshows, because they certainly do go back and forth. There's information that they may share that one area is too hot, so they'll go to another location, which could be locally or in another city, and they bounce around, or they'll send scouts out to look and see where police are located, and then move to a different location. So from that standpoint, I would say it is quite prevalent, and I would say every district that we have in the city is in one way, shape, or another affected by sideshows. I don't think there's any mistake in stating that, or even overstating that statement. Some things that we do, again, I'm not really going to go into some of the covert things, but the overt portions of it. As you know, the spectator ordinance is being utilized, and that is highly successful in just dealing with the spectator portion of it, which really fuels a lot of what we deal with when it comes to the spectators. And another thing that we're doing is vehicle seizures. So a lot of times, large groupings of people is either problematic in sending officers in there. We certainly have instances, and even lately, where officers have taken rocks and bottles at their vehicles, causing damage to some of our vehicles. So what we can do on those is we identify vehicles themselves by license plates and track them down. And then at a later date, we go seize the cars and take those. And a typical impound for that 30-day impound costs the driver somewhere near $3,000 when it's all said and done, which is a fairly hefty position to be in. Number one, you lose your car and then you pay that much money. And certainly we have plans coming up. We just recently had a meeting with BFO and all the stakeholders around here, and even with the Sheriff's Department, CHP, looking at the direction that we're going to go with a lot of these organized sideshows and different things that we can collectively use together. Because we can certainly push the sideshows out of San Jose, but then they're just going to end up in some other city, and then vice versa, they're going to come back. So we're really looking at a more global view and how to deal with them, and hit the pain points, which is truly the vehicles and the spectators.
Great, I appreciate that feedback. It was very detailed. I don't have any additional questions. You covered it all, Chief. So thank you. But that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Dennis.
Thank you. So I'll pick up where Councilmember both Jimenez and Vice Mayor left off, and that is in the traffic enforcement staffing units. I was thinking about, well, when I was young, the problem used to be cruising and going at an extremely slow speed, and how much I think maybe we desire that instead of what we're seeing now with the drifters and the fast and the furious trends that we see here in San Jose. But knowing that we can't go back to the past, so how do we deal with this? And I really appreciate all the proactive work that's been happening in seizing some of the cars, which really I think is one of the most effective ways I think that we can put a stop to it, especially if other youth knows about it. And so I was wondering if you are all doing any kind of public campaign just to take lots of great pictures of all the wonderful cars that we have now in our lots, and that maybe have not been returned because of the expensive fines. I just think, you know, I'm sure that it's not going to be the complete deterring reason for people who like to be involved in drifting and donuts and sideshows and all that stuff. But I think it's a good economic deterrent. Times are hard. So are we doing anything to kind of promote all the great stuff, all the great cars that we've been towing?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councilmember Arenas. And so just to put in perspective, I know that we, as we started doing it, we did do a news article, and our PIOs have been very aggressive in putting a lot of the information out and putting the information together. I know there was a news article where Councilmember Jones and Councilmember Esparza were interviewed in regards to that specifically. We actually did, and as part of our meeting the other day, you're absolutely correct in that there's nothing that's more telling than the picture of a car being towed or being put up. And we certainly have just over the last couple of days compiled those pictures itself. And so you're going to be seeing those shortly. So our PIOs, and then also with working in conjunction with some of our video people, are putting together, number one, some PSA announcements to go out to essentially detail this is what you're going to pay if we take your car. So there's that financial burden that's on there. Certainly emphasize the danger of the sideshows and what we're seeing in there. So I think you can actually expect to see that probably within the next few days.
Wonderful. I would say sideshows should have, from the PD department, should have like their own Instagram and Twitter handle and whatever else young people are using nowadays to connect with each other. So whatever those apps are, I think it's money well invested if we paid for some advertisement to get some of those pictures promoted within those social media paths. Otherwise, I mean, I know that bad news travels really fast, but I think this is not only a good way to deter future sideshows, but just a really good way of telling what we're doing in the meantime. One of the things that I had, unfortunately, in my district, you know, I think Councilmember Jimenez also, we share the border down here in the southeast. And because our roads are sometimes get a little lonelier, not as traveled as others, or just because they're away from what the city center is, people know that it's harder to get to. And so more sideshows come our way because there's uninterrupted roads, right, which are kind of ideal. And some of our residents put in like these little humps in the middle of the street, which was not a good idea, and I'd not encourage that. But that's how desperate my residents are, that they put these, you know, these obstacles in the middle of the street so that they could deter these donuts from happening. Outside of just doing, you know, taking these things into your own hands, I know that there's some like what do you call them, like these little raised round I don't know, street elements that could deter some of this drifting and sideshows. Have we thought about investing a little bit more in some of the streets that we know are closer to our residents, and that would push away, because I know we're not going to eliminate all of this at once, but if we put some of those kinds of street surface interruptions in closer to our residential streets, then we would kind of push the rest of the drifters and sideshow folks into more of the streets where they're normally going, because I feel like they're slowly creeping into our street that our streets that are just in the middle of our residents. Is that something that that you guys have picked up on? Maybe trying to steer them in a certain place so that, you know, we can at least we know that they're going to happen, but if we know that they're going to happen on San Felipe or on Silver Creek Valley Road, that at least that those are kind of not designated, but places where we would expect them to show up.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Lieutenant and I would have any more. I mean, certainly we're always assessing the locations. You know, there's different ones, there's different things I think that are involved here. I mean, because you have your street racers, which are obviously looking for open thoroughfares so that they can get up to high rates of speed. You have your side shows, which really are looking for an intersection or an area where they can, you know, go around in circles and do that portion of it. So both of them, while related, are a little bit different in how they're handled. I know that, and we do this quite a bit. I mean, we certainly ask our residents to call us for their patrols. We watch what's going on. But one of the things we do, especially in more of the rural areas, when air support is up, is they keep track of those areas and kind of fly around them and can direct officers in if they look and see if what a side show is starting or occurring or people are starting to congregate. I think it's just always kind of a mix between, you know, there's certain things that you can do from an engineering standpoint and putting things out that deter the side shows and the racers, but then also, you know, then our community starts having issue with all these different things that they're having to deal with in driving. So it's certainly something we look at. It's certainly something we talk to DOT about when we do it from an engineering standpoint, and we keep an eye on it.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
you know, I now I understand that there might be different reasons why. So the folks who are doing donuts are not necessarily looking for a street race, clear thoroughfare. Any intersection kind of will do, as long as it's, I guess, wide enough for them to do some nice donuts out there. So that might be the reason why they're choosing some neighborhoods that are far away from the rest of the city center, so that they can not get caught. And I guess for those type of sideshows, would you call that a sideshow? The donuts, is that a sideshow, or is a sideshow like the drag racing?
It can be a little bit of both, but generally your sideshow is going to be the ones where you have a crowd and they're doing donuts in the street. And Dave, I know that you had something to add on the engineering side.
Yeah, actually, you kind of touched on it with DOT, and a lot of stuff comes to DOT and engineering and how we tackle those things best. So that, you know, in most cases, it is a DOT type related question. However, we do work hand in hand with them to accomplish those things. So we're always looking to work with them and looking for, you know, innovative ideas in how to accomplish that goal, and working with the Vision Zero Task Force as well. It's another thing that comes up with them. So those are all things we work on collectively, and we're certainly looking at options. And then to step back real briefly, and I will just make a note, Councilman, if you look at on November 16th, our Twitter page, our PIO put out an extensive media relations thing on Twitter regarding the November 15th sideshow activity. It also has some photos almost identical to what you had mentioned, to be quite honest, about vehicles on tow trucks, some pictures of that, and then also some costs involved in talking about it being about a $3,200 hit to the pocketbook if they do get involved in these sideshows and get their vehicles towed. So as far as messaging, I think we're on the cusp of that, and we're doing the best we can to get things messaged out to where people are going to see them as a deterrent. So great idea, and we're certainly working to get that out to the public.
I'm glad, thank you. Well, you know, if you can just keep some, a strategy in mind, and I, you know, of course, the Department of Transportation and their engineers know best how to manage traffic and the flow and the safety of all of us. But it would be great if we could target maybe some of the areas that these folks have been doing sideshows that are close to residential areas, and that way we can keep them maybe in more of the streets that are considered more rural streets or empty streets. I just think that once they start getting closer, which they have been in my district, closer to the residential area, that it poses greater danger for those residents who are coming in and out of their homes in car or bikes or what have you. And lately, of course, you know, we're all trying to get some relief by going outside and walking, even if it is in late hours. So anything that you could do to help prevent that from creeping a little bit more into the residential area would be great. And thank you for your efforts. I'm going to look on Twitter a little bit later to see those pictures, and I'll retweet, of course. All right, so I'm going to move into some of the statistics for the bi-monthly status report. And I'm not going to repeat what I've said. I think you already heard, and Lieutenant Donahue is on here. You've already heard some of my concerns that I have. Coincidentally, the day that we were having this discussion on Tuesday, there was a article that came out on the Mercury News that it's literally this is the title of the news article. It's literally at record levels. Prosecutors up and down California say they've seen a rise in domestic violence amidst the pandemic. And so these are state and federal prosecutors across California coming together, sharing some of their statistics and strategies around violence against, well, I won't say just women and men, but just the domestic violence that has been happening. So they had some strategies. They talked about Alameda County Family Justice Center and how they did some outreach because they recognized that people weren't coming to them for all the reasons that we already know. And after reaching out to folks that had been kind of on that they have recorded approaching them, they had a 90% increase of referrals in child abuse and child sex crimes. And so it just comes to show you this is not something, this is obviously something that's a trend. Like I said, I think it's part of what we need to look into and get a better picture of, because I think, having the rape statistics is one piece of this picture, but the complete picture and the greater numbers, as we've seen in the last 5 years from a presentation that was presented to us last year from San Jose PD in November 12th of 2019, and it was a special meeting for the city council. The majority of the statistics were for children under the age of 14, and this is crimes 261 and 288A, right? This is where the largest number of happenings for children were taking place. And so for 2019, there was a total of 762, and in years past, 700, 600, 700, 400. And I think we've lost track of that piece of it. This rape statistics is part of the UCR. This is a part of what you continue to provide to the federal government. But I don't know that is a complete picture for the city of San Jose, because it's a portion of what is happening under sexual assault. The other piece that I think that we haven't kept in mind is those crimes against children, especially 0 through 14 years of age. Like I said, that was the bulk, really the bulk of the cases. So for 2019, rape for children 0 through 14 was a total of 39. But the 288, the lewd and, tell me what the other L is for on that.
The lewd and
It's
lascivious.
lewd and lascivious.
Yeah, yes. With children under the years of 14, for 2019, that was 762. And so when you add that to the picture of sexual assault has a continuum, right? And rape is just one of those categories. And so I'm hoping that we can kind of paint a better picture, tell a better picture of what is really happening to these victims, as we know that these are the victims that were happening, that most of the crimes under sexual assault were happening, not to lessen rape at all, because of course we need to keep our eye on rape and the subsections under rape. But I want to make sure that we don't lose track of this. Can we somehow collect this information for the time from March to the end of the year at one point or another, Jennifer or Captain, tell me who to direct myself in this request to, but it would be great to see what we're missing in terms of the picture.
I'll defer to Acting Assistant Chief Tyndall to see if that's something that is available to be put in that annual report that's coming in this, where we're going to add more, we added that bigger picture. Is that something that you can do? I don't know what the workload or the work effort is on that, and how readily available that is. But I know we've reported on some of that information before, to Councilmember Arenas' point. But I think we do normally get into that level of detail on that new annual report.
Yeah, I think with the upcoming report in March, I think it's something we can certainly look at as far as getting those numbers and delving in. A lot of the times, and to your point, a lot of times it becomes problematic extrapolating some of the data that we're looking for. A lot of these times we have to go through and look at each report by report to look at certain things. But I think once we delineate the detail and what we're looking for, it's certainly something that we can look at on how much of a pull it's going to be. And I certainly would like to have that data available when we meet in March in regards to that. And then just one thing I would like to just add, because you bring up a great point when it talks to our children, and just some of the outreach efforts that we currently have going, even during the pandemic that we have going on, because we know certainly when people are more in the house, I mean, a lot of it ends up being the reporting. And I know we've talked about this before, as far as the outreach to not only our survivors, but also to the kids and stuff that are out there. So in that regard, I mean, I think, as you know, we do have a YWC advocate who's in-house that we deal with all of our sexual assault cases. And so they're very active, and that's the in-house portion of it. I mean, certainly we deal with the county portion of it, which is the victim side over there, hand in hand working with that. And, truly it does start with our initial contact. And certainly our officers are trained, to look for behaviors from children. And if they see something that is odd or needs further investigation, then it's certainly taken at that point. And if we have to call in advocates, or if we need to do a special interview, we certainly do that. But some of the things we're working on now and could continue to work on, besides the advocate, is the, as you know, the YWCA, the training that is going on in the middle and high schools. Again, a little more problematic because of COVID, but certainly we're doing more of a Zoom type one. And there's a whole list of high schools and middle school ages that we're dealing with in regards to that, as far as the reporting. And then the other portion of it with the Silicon Valley Counseling Program continues as we speak. I know you're very familiar with the Vigilant Parent Initiative through ICAC, and we continue to do that both with our sworn staff and then also some of our non-sworn staff, dealing with the parents and really dealing with more of the proactive security, certainly when it comes to social media and things like sexting and pictures and passing all that stuff through. Is very prevalent out there, and it's something that we're involved in. And one of the things that I will continue to say, our ICAC unit, while maybe small in stature, we certainly control the funding and or the conversation between over 103 agencies around us. They're very, very active in that realm when it deals with children and children being victimized. And even though, you know, when we look at ICAC itself, we're really talking about 103 agencies that are at our fingertips. They're all work together hand in hand to essentially, you know, deal with it. And I know we send our people out because we have a very robust forensic team that deals with that portion of it, send them out, and, you know, everything from covert and overt details on that. So certainly is not lost. I think every one of us when we go up to sexual assault and you deal with sexual assault investigators, they're a special breed of people that the kids certainly hit home with them.
Yes, and thank you for reminding me of the really great work that you're all doing under ICAC. And I'm guessing that a lot of criminals are if they're intent on committing crimes, they're going to commit them wherever they find opportunity. And as we've seen, property crimes change from residential to school or to commercial. I imagine the same thing that's happening potentially with children. Although if the statistics typically tell us that the crimes that happen that involve children that are sexual in nature, these kiddos typically know their victims. And one of the things that I had asked previously from this group is to find out where this particular statistic, in that where the offenders and the survivors, especially for those crimes, the 762, the ones with the bulk of involving children under the age of 14, were they living in the same residence? Because one of the things that I fear is that overcrowding and multiple families living in one home is part of the problem in allowing this type of crime of opportunity to happen. And so I want to see if we can have that particular statistic also reflected in this year-end report. In the past, what was given to us was like whether the crime was public or private. But my question in a more refined way to find whether this is an issue of overcrowding, or are they living with their offender, right? Are they living in the same household? And what kind of relief are they getting at this point when they're sheltered in place and forced to live with those perpetrators? And so I'd like to see if we can include that. Is that possible to do in this following report?
We can certainly look at it, council member, because I know that, I mean, to your point, I mean, we certainly do know that in most sexual assault offenses, whether it be with children or whether it be with adults, it is known offenders. And certainly there's a different element when you add in the cohabitation portion of it. One of the studies that's in place right now, or one of the work groups that is in place and in progress, is dealing with the substandard housing study, which addresses some of those things. So I'm hoping to see what we get from that. Again, a lot of it ends up just being a deeper dive into the reports themselves. And I would certainly say, I mean, we can look at it from a San Jose standpoint, but I think it's more of a global issue when we deal from a county. You know, I would say the trends would be the same across county lines. And as we know, we can do, we want in the San Jose area, but it really is a collective work group with all of our community partners that span across not only San Jose, but into the county level, the state level, and then also deal with our community partners and advocacy groups. So I would hope so. It'd be nice to be able to do that. It just may take some, you know, pulling in each direction from each of the other entities that are involved. I would love to say that we have all the answers and all the statistics, but we certainly don't. And I think even from the article that that was in the Mercury, we looked at that. And actually, Lieutenant Donahue actually got a hold of some of those agencies themselves to see where those stats were coming from and to answer some of those questions. So I think it's certainly something we can look at.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate that. Lastly, I'm just going to ask first, when we shared some of this information, the other, and I sent, I think, an email that included Chief NOV on this, and Jennifer, I included you as well. But these are the statistics that were recommended in terms of telling a better picture of who the perpetrators and the survivors are. And one of the things that we've learned through the summer in a very informal meeting with Chief Garcia and Deputy Chief Randall was that the crimes, the severity of child abuse and the severity of the crimes against against survivors was just greater. These are crimes that normally probably would have had over a year's worth of time to reach to a certain level of severity, but now they're at a huge severity because of, income loss, of stress, of sheltering in place, of maybe having not a very large place to live. And so for me, it's important to just get a picture of where we're at, even with all of these calls that we get, to see how many times have we responded to this particular victim and this perpetrator, so that we can get a better idea of where they're at in this relationship. Are they, at the tail end of this, and the severity of the crime, I think will allow us to tell a better story. I know that was included in the statistics on Monday, but what wasn't included was the number of times that police were called to a home. Was this the fifth call in the last 2 months, last 6 months, last year? I think we could provide better support to our survivors, and if we know that this is the 8th call in a window of 6 months, or whatever that benchmark is that tells us that this is going to jump into some very severe consequences for that survivor, that we know that that's the benchmark. And so we make sure that they receive a call from our YWCA partners that we're contracted with. I just think that there's something more that we can do to help bring those services to those survivors, rather than waiting for that fatal call, or the severity of the abuse happening in the household that will impact this whole generation of, you're seeing it in your children. If you have children at home who are distance learning, there's a level of trauma and stress that we're seeing just having them in our household every single day, and not having them have a level of socialization. And then you add to that abuse. We are building a pipeline of future victims of domestic violence and sex trafficking and sex work. And so that's what I really am ultimately after interrupting. And so I know that we have different strategies to do that. But I think what we need to do is make sure that we always get the statistics that can tell us a picture, so that we can respond to that. Those are my comments. Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you everyone for the presentation. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you as well. And
motion to approve.
Oh, thank you. We have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second, Councilmember Carrasco. I share some of the comments from my colleagues. Certainly hearing a lot of concern around traffic enforcement, speeding, racers, sideshows. And so I'm definitely looking forward to having more officers within our traffic enforcement unit. I did have a question though in regards to that. The 2-team staffing model, I don't know if you can pull that slide up that you presented.
Give me just a second here, I'll get it for you.
Great.
This one, or do you want this 2 teams? That one?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, there you go.
Just curious how you came to the schedule there on the 2nd team. It doesn't seem standard. You have a 5-day, 8-hour deployment, and we're sort of missing Sundays there. And so I just kind of curious on why we weren't trying to cover all 7 days of the week, and what the thought process was behind having one 10-hour team and then another 8-hour team.
And I'm not sure if Lieutenant Anaya was going to jump in on that portion of it. I think when we looked at the two-team staffing model, a lot of what the times we're looking at were based on the evaluation of traffic patterns. So when we looked at the 6 to 4, the 6 to 4 generally covers, and I know this is when we moved to this model, and especially when we went down to, I think it was 5 officers and TU at the time, it was really, what is your bang for your buck? And at that point, it was covering a lot of our school safety programs and kids going to school. I think we'll maintain that position right now because we know eventually school will come back. But to Lieutenant Anaya's point, that is definitely adjustable. It's on a sliding scale, because if we feel that, if school is not going back and, come springtime, we start looking at the different models, we may end up just changing these hours. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on what these hours that they're carved in stone. I would say this more of the Sunday portion of it just falls with days off and looking at the what traffic patterns look like. And again, getting our officers out there. There is probably going to be some point a position where patrol is going to have to pick up some of the slack in that regard. But what I will say about the times is nothing is cut in stone. And, Dave and I had a conversation yesterday just in regards to this, that we will be flexible based on what the patterns look like.
And getting some feedback there. I don't know if Lieutenant Anaya wanted to jump in.
I think he's having a problem with the iPad that he's working off of.
Got it. Okay. So my comment would just be, obviously, right, we would want to be able to, I agree with, first off, getting our most bang for our buck. So kind of focusing on where we really think traffic enforcement is needed. But secondly, as we begin to build up, which this is kind of the first step in doing so, I would like to see if, right, we can cover also more ground, right? So we sort of go from simply just strategically focusing on most bang for our buck to then covering some more ground, covering all 7 days of the week, as we've done here, sort of spreading it up to an 8 p.m. hour. And so that was it. I just didn't understand the logic behind what looked like an abnormal model of a shift. But it's, I think, hearing that it's flexible, I think that's positive. And then my other question would be, in the presentation, it was stated that it could be a couple years to actually get to this 2-team model. What is our actual kind of thought process there? Is this not something that we're thinking is realistic next year, and why?
So I think when we're looking at, fully staffing it to the point where we have those, that model that is there, as you know, we constantly balance the priorities within the police department, and with the key component being patrol. I think when we looked at it when TU is maximum staffing levels, we had over 100 extra officers in patrol. That right now we have 100 less officers in patrol based on when those staffing models were there. So certainly our response to 911 is always going to be a priority for how we respond to calls for service. And while traffic is certainly important, and the KSIs and Vision Zero and everything, it's still a balancing act for us to look at bodies coming in, bodies coming out. We certainly know that with higher ahead, that will help us, because then we're not really looking at that gap, or as officers leave, it kind of bridges that gap. So that's helpful in that regard. But when we look at it right now, even, from our numbers, we're still at this point less than 1,000 street ready officers. So it's a balancing act when it comes to that. I think there's one thing in this is we don't want to overpromise. We don't want to essentially say that, by springtime, we're going to have these units deployed. It truly is an academy by academy setting. COVID certainly sent us back, because where we had 3 academies all in place, we had to spread those out a little bit as far as numbers to have the academies in there for safety purposes. So that pulled us back a little bit. But I think to answer your question in a roundabout way, I think we would deploy and go to 2-team model quicker. One portion of that is going to be adding a sergeant over there, just based on span of control and the fact that we need a supervisor there. So I wouldn't say that we would not move to this model until we have maximum personnel. I would say we would probably move to this model a lot sooner, just with fewer officers on each team, and then build each one of those teams as we get bodies available.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And I think, obviously considering the staffing issues, although we have, improved and kind of stymied some of the loss that we had in years past, we know that we still have insufficient officers in general, just for our city and the needs of our city. And I don't think we're going to, we get into a place where we're really at sufficient level of staffing anytime soon. And that's where I would agree with some of the comments from my colleagues that we have to be thinking of other means. And certainly during the Vision Zero Task Force, that's some of the things we'll be talking about. And I think it was Councilmember Hernandez was bringing up ideas around, how do we deploy some of these, like the dots, the speed dots or speed bumps, right, in certain areas where we know there's a high level of either street racing or sideshows. And I would agree that we need to kind of think of some of those mechanisms in addition to what we've had on our city legislative priorities, like the camera, their ability to get issue speeding tickets or red light and stop sign violations with cameras and camera technology. Certainly been a lot more of that going on now during the pandemic, as all bridge tolls and other means to be able to do that, and coming forward on HOV lanes and the ability to be able to issue tickets there too. I think we need to be looking at those kind of technologies to be able to augment what we can't do with personnel, and where we know we're always going to be deficient, and hopefully then we can deploy our personnel in areas where we know we can't use technology. And I have heard as well from some of the racer enforcement, and this was brought up in the presentation too, that given some of the dynamic of our community right now, whereas maybe previously racer enforcement units could go out to a sideshow area and chirp their sirens, and light up their lights, and people would begin to disperse. We're seeing now the crowds actually be very confrontational. And if you show up with just, 2 patrol cars, and you get, groups of a couple hundred people lining up, throwing things at the cars, breaking windows, blocking the patrol cars in, now you have a much more serious problem on your hands. And then we get to issues of use of force and things that we don't necessarily want to get to. And so I think the strategy now is got to be a little different, where it's us trying to actually get to these locations, the sideshows or the street races, before there's an opportunity for hundreds of people to set up, right, and begin an operation like that. Because otherwise we're just sort of there's not enough. The ratio is too far off. And so I think that we need to be thinking a little bit out of the box there, and appreciate this. So again, this opportunity with staffing up, and look forward to getting more officers, and look forward to, again, the efforts through Vision Zero. Those were all my questions. And we do have a motion and a second. So if we can go to a roll call vote.
Arenas,
Yes.
Jones,
Aye.
Crosco,
Aye.
Jimenez,
Yeah.
Peralez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll move on to item D2, which is our Domestic Violence Prevention and Awareness Annual Report.
Chair Peralez, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Lieutenant Rob Lang from the Family Violence Unit. I'm trying to share my screen. Give me one moment, please. Okay, Chair, do you have my screen up on yours?
Yeah, we can share the, or we can see the screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Rob Lang. I'm the lieutenant in charge of the San Jose Police Department's Family Violence Unit. And today we're going to be here to talk about the Domestic Violence Prevention and Awareness Annual Update for the year. Today I have two of my partners from the YWCA here with me. I have Lindsay Mansfield and Cynthia Melchor. And at this point, I'll give Lindsay an opportunity to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lindsay Mansfield. I'm currently the Associate Director of Support Services at YWCA. Been with the organization for about a decade, and I oversee programming for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And then I wanted to also have Cynthia go ahead and introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cynthia Melchor, and I'm the Community Support Manager at the YWCA, and I've been with the YWCA for about 2.5 years now, and I oversee the Community Support Program that provides services to survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay and Cynthia. And so for the committee, the first slide I'll bring up, or the next slide I'll bring up, is just a breakdown of how our family violence unit is actually set up. The goal in the top there hasn't changed from last year. We're still utilizing the multidisciplinary approach, and we're doing basically everything that we can with our partners to make sure that we take care of our survivors of family violence or intimate partner violence, those types of things. When we look at the sworn staffing of our unit, our family violence unit is broken down into 3 details or 3 teams. The first is the domestic violence detail, which domestic violence is the term formerly used. We all know that intimate partner violence is a better term to use today, but DV is so ingrained in the lexicon that we kind of use them interchangeably. So we have our DV team. Next is our threat management detail. They do domestic violence restraining order violations. They do stalking cases, threat cases, workplace violence, that type of thing. And then the third team is the child, elder, and dependent adult abuse detail. So those are the 3 teams. The one that we're primarily going to be speaking about today is the top one, the domestic violence detail. We're very fortunate here at the Family Violence Center to have partners from other agencies working under one roof together to like I said earlier, to give our survivors the best services possible. The first one listed there is Department of Family and Child Services, also known as DFCS, or CPS for those of us that have been around for a long, long time. Next comes our victim advocate from the YWCA. She's here full-time with us. She's amazing, so I hope I get the chance to brag on her a little more later. And next comes our partner from the district attorney's office, and they're here part-time as needed. On slide number 3, we discuss a little bit closer our partnership with YWCA of Silicon Valley. So they've been our contract partner for domestic violence issues since October 2016, and we're currently in contract with them. And as I said, we have a full-time advocate in our office each day with us. She's bilingual, and she does things such as counseling, lethality assessment, safety planning. You can read the slide. I won't have to read all of it to you, but the numbers that I'd like to point out is this year she did more follow-ups than the previous year. She did approximately 1,700 follow-ups this year, and that resulted in 502 survivors being referred to getting services or referrals. So that's 1/2 of our contract with the Y is our in-office partner, Adriana. The next part is the 24-hour hotline, and that hotline is available, as it says, 24 hours per day. And victims, potential victims, police department personnel, anybody can reach out to that hotline and have an advocate on the other end of the line ready to help them with whatever issues or whatever is going on that time. At this point, Lindsay, do you have anything you'd like to add to this slide?
I think the only detail that I would add is that this is bilingual 24/7, and then if we have other language access that comes through where people need additional languages, we do have interpreters that we're able to get on the line, so that doesn't end up being a barrier for survivors. And I think the fact that it's toll-free, people can access us from wherever they are, so that's all I wanted to add.
Perfect. Thank you for adding those. Okay, I'll move on to slide number 4. This slide is a little bit busy, and I apologize for that, but it breaks down a bunch of different types of crimes and the statistics that we look at for the main domestic violence categories. So the 4 categories listed on the left here, the first one is domestic battery, which is Penal Code 243E1. And that, if I had to give a simple example of that, would be we have the familial relationship, dating relationship, whatever that categorizes this as a domestic violence incident. And that might be something like a push or some incident that does not result in a visible injury or a complaint of pain, but the survivor wants the other person arrested. So that's that type of a situation. The next category is domestic violence minor injury, and that would be if there was a minor complaint of pain or a minor visible injury. That would be the appropriate penal code section would be 273.5A. Next is the same section, 273.5A, but it's broken down into serious bodily injury or a weapon was used. And clearly those are the most serious of the offenses that we're looking at here. And then the fourth is the violation of a restraining order or penal code section 273.6. And this slide breaks down how many of each of those we have per month throughout the year. And without much context, that doesn't tell us a whole lot. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which kind of breaks down the fiscal year that ended this year and the previous year. So I have on the top there, if you see, we have July of 18 through June of 19 in the first numbered column. And then the second column with numbers is July 19 through June of 2020, the fiscal year that recently passed. And when we look at those, we have, this is an annual number, and these are occurrences. And the 4 different categories are on the left there. When you look at them, we see a 3.3% reduction, a 7.2% reduction. The 273.5 was serious bodily injury or weapon. We see for the annual year, we see a 16.7% increase. And again, that being the more serious of the 4 crimes on here, that's alarming to us. And then the next slide is 273.6A, the violation of restraining orders, and that went up 4.1%. So that begs the question, how much of this is a result of COVID and how much of this was prior to COVID? So as we go to slide number 6, this breaks that down a little further. And what I did here was the months are April through June of 19 and then April through June of 2020. And remember, this is an annual report based on the fiscal year. So that's why the numbers ended in June for this report today. When we look at those, we see that every single one of those was a reduction, which I apologize, but I'm going to go back one slide. If we look at the third one there, 16.7% increase in 273.5 serious bodily injury or weapon, that makes, what if I just saw that number alone, that would make me think that during the COVID shelter-in-place timeframe that we had a huge uptick. But when we break it down to the next slide, slide 6 again, we see that there's still a 5% reduction in that number from the previous fiscal year. Now, the biggest thing that I want to point out here is that when you look at those, we're talking about a reduction from 101 to 96. So when we deal with relatively small numbers, and we have to recognize that that can dramatically change percentages. And real quick, I know it goes without saying, but I don't want it to make it sound like if I'm minimizing these numbers, it's only a difference of 5. Every single one of those 5 was a devastating incident for that survivor and their family. So I don't want it to seem as though I'm discounting any of this. I'm just purely looking at numbers here. And I think that that's important to look at. So during the COVID, the 3 months of COVID that were captured in the report being spoken about today, we had overall a 17.1% decrease in those occurrences in those 4 crime types. Slide number 7 here, we talk about our domestic violence high-risk response team. And this was something, as you remember, we've spoken about it with this group before. The idea was that we would, the city found some money for us to try a pilot program where we could have a YWCA advocate go out into the field and respond after hours to have an in-person, face-to-face meeting with survivors. The program got off to a start in June of 2019, but at that time we were still it was the growing pains of the program. The YWCA was trying to train and hire their advocates, because this isn't just something that you send any advocate out to. They made sure that they had the right advocates to send out there, because this face-to-face is very important. All of their advocates are good. I'm not taking anything away from them, but this was a special program. So once that program kind of got up and running, we ended up with 7 in-person deployments. And then, of course, everybody's world got turned on its ear when COVID struck. So that kind of led to a pause in the in-person responses. And at that point, the YWCA kind of shifted their tactics, and they used more of a virtual response. And I'll probably turn it over to Lindsay at this point. She can probably explain that a little bit better than I can. So, Lindsay, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I think something I always like to point out, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is that for DV high risk response, it doesn't mean that we're responding to every call that comes through that's domestic violence related, right? So somebody has to screen in as being high lethality. So that's already going to reduce the numbers of who we would, potentially respond out to. So sometimes when you look at data and you see a number like 7, that doesn't seem like a large number, right? But at the same time, we are only responding out to those that are considered the most high risk, so that we can provide those more in-depth services. So I like to point that out. And then the virtual responses, which have shifted, were based on a number of factors, right? So COVID doesn't just impact staff, it impacts survivors, it impacts the community. And so a lot of the feedback that we got was that people really didn't want to be engaged with any additional person face to face. And so by doing the virtual responses, we're not doing a video chat with somebody, because a lot of times it's not appropriate or not necessarily safe or comfortable to do that. We are responding to them over the phone. And then the way that that's different from any other call that we get is the training that kicks in for people that do these responses. They know that this is where they need to really focus in on safety planning and those immediate provisions, which are listed on the slide. That can be something like an emergency stay in a motel. It could be getting a Lyft ride somewhere. Sometimes the person that committed the crime is actually, taken at the time. And so people are able to stay in their house safely, but they may not know where they're going to get their next meal. So that's one of the places where we come in. And we actually saw a huge uptick in our domestic violence high risk responses. I don't know if, training with law enforcement kind of kicked into gear where people were really understanding when to contact us, or, what really shifted that. But we had those 7 in-persons, and then since then we actually had 38 domestic violence high-risk responses that we did virtually.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. And yes, thank you for pointing that out too. The slide doesn't capture, it only captures the 7 in-person deployments. But as Lindsay said, we spent a lot of time and energy in our unit here in the family violence unit, making sure that our patrol officers understood that, for example, if we had a strangulation or a suffocation case, we made it very clear to them that that should be treated more like an assault with a deadly weapon, not, quote, just a 273.5. So we made it clear to them in the patrol division how serious that is, how it is a life-threatening situation. And we've done a lot of outreach to make sure that our patrol division is aware that they should be calling and taking advantage of our partnership with the YWCA, because we do have these advocates available, and we want to make sure that the survivors get what they can get from us, because it's there and we want them to benefit from it if they so choose. So our goal was, we were hoping to get in December the in-person responses. I believe from conversations with Lindsay, I think we might be looking at closer to January, but then again, we just went into purple and things are in the air. So those are offline meetings that she and I have to have. So I'm not sure how true that December is today, because that was the plan as of a couple days ago. And as we see, our world is changing pretty rapidly sometimes. Okay. On slide number 8 here, this looks at what we're doing as a police department. And the first section there deals with the staffing at our family violence unit. Our unit is authorized for 20 sworn staff. Currently, we're staffed with 14 sworn. And we're hoping that our vacancies will be filled as our department staffing level allows. As it was already mentioned earlier today, every unit in our department is short. We all want more bodies. Patrol needs more bodies. Every unit in the department needs more bodies. So the chiefs have done a wonderful job, but they have a very difficult job of trying to figure out when there's one single body available, where would it go, and prioritizing those. So when we look at last year's number, last year when I had the same report, we also had 14. But one thing that I want to mention is last year we had 14, we got plussed up 1. So we were actually operating at 15 for a while. But then one of those bodies was what we call Article 39. Article 39 is a person that, an officer that's been injured, a work-related injury that is not able to go to the streets, but can do some good police work still. So we had an Article 39 officer in our unit, but with Article 39 officers, you don't know how long they're going to keep them. We hope that they would heal up as soon as possible and go back to patrol, but that we have little or no control over that. So the chief's office did give us an extra body, but because the Article 39 person ended up retiring, that brought us back down to the same level we were at 14. So it's not due to a lack of effort on our departments. And currently we do have 1 sergeant and 5 officers full-time assigned to the DB team. I am happy to report though that we temporarily have another person assigned to there. So that slide's a little outdated as of a couple days ago because things are rapidly changing. We have a temporary duty assignment officer here. He will only be with us for probably a couple months, but in this unit, we'll take whatever help we can get. So technically, we kind of have 1 sergeant and 6 officers right now because of the TDY. Our crime prevention unit does a really good job of getting out there and spreading awareness as well. I know that we have all of our partners in the county. There are so many people doing really good work in that area. Our crime prevention unit does teen dating violence. They have presentations that they do in the schools for what healthy relationships look like. We do healthy relationship meetings and divisionally within the department or within the city, I mean. And they've also done, talking about trying to prevent future violence in the schools. And again, a lot of it revolves around the schools, but there are some community meetings. Of course, again, with COVID, that kind of got turned on its ear a little bit. So in speaking recently with our crime prevention unit, they've kind of shifted and they're ready to move forward with doing whatever presentations they can get into the schools and do related to again, healthy relationships, teen dating, violence, those sorts of things, because we all realize that the sooner we can get in there and let somebody that, say, for example, somebody's growing up in a house where violence is common, we want that child to know that that's not normal and that shouldn't be normal for them. We're trying to break that cycle of violence by getting out there. And again, our crime prevention unit and the department is doing what we can here. And we have numerous partners that are professionals that work on that as well. That concludes the official presentation here. And at this point, I welcome any questions you may have.
But just to reiterate the item, this is item D2, our domestic violence prevention and awareness annual report. And we'll go to Blair Beekman first.
All right, thank you. I was interested how you're finding new domestic violence statistics. You're using more humanistic statistics to find about domestic violence. I think that's the same thing that's going on with KSI statistics, and it's inflating, things a bit, and it's not making things the way we're used to seeing them. And thank you for explaining that process and what we're learning to do better. We are now under a purple alert in Santa Clara County at this time. The VTA has made it an important mission to have more bus access available on its regular bus routes. I think this may help with community morale. Please continue to use caution and safe practices all through the fall and early winter here in San Jose and the Bay Area. Continue to trust how physical distancing, the simple ask of a person's health, washing your hands with soap, and the use of a mask can be of much help. I feel we're going to have to consider kids returning to classrooms may have to be put off from June 2021 until the fall of 2021. but it's also my guesswork the vaccination process should really start to be working better by next summer, and that we can be back to more familiar patterns by the summer of 2022. I thought those words may be of help. It's my own personal feelings. There's nothing exact about it, but hopefully it can help just kind of talk about community issues and just how to offer a soft touch to a difficult subject matter. And thank you.
Would you like me to call the next speaker? Because I don't know if your audio is working.
Is my audio not working?
I'm barely hearing you, so I'm going to go ahead and call speaker number 5140.
Yeah, I just want to know where all this money is going to be coming from for all these programs for everybody. You know, you're going to have all these new officers giving out tickets and all these people who are going to be online talking to people and going to people's houses. You know, it's just, in the end, you're almost like you want to interfere with people's lives. At the same time, where is the money going to come from? You're talking about a huge budget shortfall that's going to be for the year 2020, 2021, 2022. Where's all this money going to come from? No one can answer me that on the city council. The cops can't answer because they don't care. They always get paid. They're always going to get paid. You know, the guys are making $200,000-$300,000 a year. What do they care, right? You're going to take care. I mean, it's nice how they try to take care of the peasants and keep them in line for what they get paid. It's like Animal Farm. If you guys ever read that book, it's like Animal Farm here in California, especially San Jose, what people get paid and how they treat the citizens is disgusting. You guys really are terrible people, but you can never answer my questions. That's why you're terrible, because you can't answer where the money is going to come from. Somebody answer me that question. Someone have the courage to do it, even if you don't know where it's going to come from. Somebody have the courage to find out where you're going to get the money to pay for all these wonderful things. Next thing you're going to tell me is you're going to start breeding unicorns. We can maybe they can run down the bike lanes that Sam Liccardo is going to build. But you guys need to get your financial house in order, because when 2021 happens, you're going to see a recession and a depression, and you're not going to be able to handle it. How are you going to pay for everything? That's what I want to know.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I'll be breeding unicorns, but taxes, fines, fees, and grants. Those are the 4 general areas. So now I'll go to my colleagues. Councilmember Arenas.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to thank you, Chief, for a wonderful report and more importantly for the support that you're providing our survivors. And Lindsay and Cynthia, I know that you're doing some really heavy lifting here in terms of support. And so I want to thank you for that. I think this is a great approach that it seems like has rendered some really good results for you. I think I heard you say it was 7 in-person sessions before we got all interrupted with the COVID shelter in place, and 37 through Zoom sessions. Were those and so first of all, before I begin asking questions, I just think that's a wonderful approach to take, and I think that in the end you had about 500 referrals that you sent out to a different agency that you don't exclusively just keep for the YWCA, but you give out to the network. So that's a lot of really great work. I just overall, I want to give some comments, and then I'm going to get into some level of detail. The other piece that I think is working, and that I appreciate you making it really work is borrowing from different teams for whatever reason, whether it's a limited capacity in terms of having an officer not be able to be in patrol, or having some folks on a lend basis, but maximizing your resources. In the meantime, I think it's a great use of folks, especially in this department, that I think you could probably get 100 more folks in there, and you probably could continue to be just as busy. And so please let us know how we can further support this. I'm absolutely, an advocate in this area. So please continue to let us know how you're handling some of those cases. I saw there's a significant amount of closure in cases here. And so something else just to note. And lastly, I just want to say that I think there's some wonderful work as well reflected in your healthy relationship series that you're doing through the crime prevention. And also, I think it was initially through YWCA. And this actually came from a grant that I had requested some years ago. And at first, I think it was being done only with some school districts because of just relationship building. It was easy to build out. And so here come my questions now. Are we limited to, I think at that point, it was only Oak Grove School District that was involved in some of the curriculum. Have we expanded from Oak Grove? How are we including Eastside Union High School District and going to the sites where maybe the statistics or the data tells us that we should go?
Thank you for the question. Lindsay, do you have information on that as far as the schools the Y is going into? I think that Councilmember Arenas, I believe that is actually run out of our sexual assault unit, that actual program. I'm roughly familiar with it, but I don't have all the specifics on the schools.
And Councilmember Perenes, I can actually come in on that. So there are a number of schools that are involved in that do also include, I can see on here, Independence, Lincoln, Silver Creek, Santa Teresa, Apollo, Broadway, Gunderson, that are involved in all of those.
You're on mute, council member.
I'm on mute. Okay. So one of the things I just wanted to make sure is that this is data driven, and that we are going to the areas that we know are happening, that some of these things are happening. I know this is a citywide, it's not specific to any particular domestic violence is not specific to poor communities or to my immigrant communities or any of those stereotypes that maybe sometimes flash before in our mind. It is everybody. It's involves everyone. But there's certainly, if the data tells us, and this year-end report tells us where some of these crimes are happening, maybe we could be at one point very strategic in the kinds of presentations that we provide in that particular neighborhood or zip code. I know for the zip code 95122, and I think I've said this before, is we have the highest number of, second highest number of child abuse cases, substantiated child abuse cases. And we had the same number of people living in the zip code 95122 that I share with Councilmember Carrasco and Councilmember Esparza, same number of people that live in the city of Gilroy in one zip code, right? And so there's an intense amount of overcrowding in this particular zip code, and that just creates a lot of risk factors for our community and for our children. So I'd like for some of the one part of the strategy is to just cover everyone, because everybody should receive this great information on healthy relationships and prevention. And then the second part to that is to be strategic and to look at some of the areas that have that where we can make the most impact, because we know that a certain number of crimes are happening in that area. So it would be wonderful to see some of that happening. But I love that you continue to do this, that you continue to invest in prevention. I actually want to thank Jennifer for helping us restore some of that money that we had secured with my council colleagues initially for sexual assault and domestic violence. And this this restoration of money actually allowed for additional money to trickle into this prevention piece. And so I really appreciate that. Otherwise, you know, when the money starts dissipating, we all of a sudden can't do this anymore, right? Suddenly it's a luxury item. And so I never want it to be a luxury item. I want it to be part and parcel of what we do. So thank you so much for that piece. The other piece I was going to ask you about, oh, and let me just say that it hasn't gone unnoticed that I really appreciate the way that you talk about our survivors, and that you actually use the word survivors. I haven't heard anybody speak about victims and taking, you know, really the power away from our survivors in the way that we deal with them. And I hope that, you know, trickles all the way down to our officers that are actually first on the scene, because they're basically they're our first responders and the first in line to interact with those survivors. And so I'm just really impressed and really appreciative. I shouldn't be impressed because I know the level of training that you all have gone through in the different units that you all are part of. And so I just want to say thank you for that continued respect and honoring of our community. I noticed that there was a really low number of restraining order violations during kind of the peak health orders when families were really impacted by violence. And I'm guessing due to survivors were forced to really isolate and quarantine with their abusers. Have we, is this because less survivors are actually filing for these restraining orders? And is that something that maybe Lindsay and Cynthia, you are all supporting to enact one more time? Or is this something that's not practical for our survivors at this point?
Yeah, so in terms of restraining order violations, I think part of it, and this is all kind of conjecture, right, on my part, but I think that it's due to people being sheltered in place, there were less restraining order violations, at least that we were hearing about from survivors. And then I think initially there was a dip in the amount of calls that we were receiving because people were sheltering in place with the person that was harming them. And so to be able to call and reach out and try to, you know, have a restraining order or go through any process was really challenging because maybe that person never left the home. And so they were sheltering in place with them. We've actually seen quite a large uptick over the last few months of people calling and seeking legal services, and our legal team is active and providing support in those arenas, as well as our Family Violence Center coordinator there. She's been linking with survivors that come through. Sorry, you're on mute again.
I'm sorry. You know, I have children who are like running around. One fell and was bleeding and all kinds of stuff. Of course, it's Murphy's Law. Everything happens. And so I every chance I get, I put myself on mute because I just don't know what's going to happen next in my household. So I apologize. By the way, she's fine. She's absolutely fine. Anyways, so I really appreciate that and letting us know that there's a large uptick that allows for some stopgap measure maybe, or a sense of a safety net, safety planning for some of these survivors. So I'm glad to hear that. A question that I had about some of the outreach that you were doing on the online. I think, you know, at the beginning of the presentation, Did you find that there was a lot of families who you couldn't connect to because they didn't have access to the internet, or was that not a obstacle for them?
Yeah, so I would just want to clarify that we actually didn't provide Zoom responses. We provided over the phone responses. We switch over to Zoom once we have like engaged with the survivor initially over the phone and learned what they do have access to, if it's safe. So if they're going to be doing like ongoing case management or receiving additional support assessments, things of that nature, then we do switch to Zoom. And Cynthia, I don't know if you wanted to add in on challenges that maybe advocates are noticing with the survivors.
Yeah, so we have actually noticed challenges with internet, especially with our Spanish-speaking survivors. That's something that sometimes Zoom isn't always the best option, but we have noticed that advocates have been having some trouble figuring out ways to connect over Zoom.
Because because the survivors don't know how to maneuver through the program, access it, or lack of internet.
I think that what I've been hearing is more lack of knowledge around using it. That's what we've been noticing.
Okay, got it. You know, we do have folks through the CFT. Oh my God. The California Emerging Technology Fund. We have service providers that we have under contract, and I know that our librarian has been very flexible in sharing some of the resources that we've procured for digital inclusion. So we have some hotspots that can be available to survivors. If that's something that you notice that that they're lacking, please let me know, let my office know. We can help with that response. And then with that, with creating maybe some capacity building around how to maneuver through the internet and Zoom and all that. As you've seen, I've muted myself, I don't know how many times, so maybe I need a refresher myself, but I can't imagine when you're on a high stress level and then having to learn something new or remember how to, you know, bookmark it or whatever it is. You know, we just can't think straight as much as we want to when we're stressed. And so we can talk offline. I think that there's some space, some availability, some opportunity to bring in some of those grantees to maybe pivot and support the survivors in your programs. So let me know, we can talk offline and figure that piece out. The last piece I was going to talk about is, I just think that it's really important, I think for when we summarize the rape statistics, I know we have a breakdown because we want to see what those statistics, what the categories are, and I really appreciate it. I think in the end, there might be some folks who might misunderstand that, or when they're looking for statistics. I think on your dashboard, all of these subcategories of rape are all then get folded into one number, correct? And then people can break it down into whether it's, you know, sodomy or copulation or whatever else.
Rob, you want me to take that one?
Yes, please go ahead.
So, Councilmember, for rape, are you talking about domestic rape or for rape in general for the sexual assaults?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the.
Are you looking at the department's dashboard?
No, I'm so sorry. I took a picture so I wouldn't have to go back to that presentation. And then of course, now I have to go back to that presentation, but yes, it has, you know, it has a domestic.
Council member?
Yes.
Or Chair, could I chime in on this one?
Yes, and you know what, council member, I can, if you want to, this is the last of my comments, so you can go ahead and begin yours. I don't think that there's anything else that I wanted to share other than I really appreciate some of the work that's been done to be proactive and reach out to our survivors, and I'm really I guess it makes me feel better about where we're at with sexual assault and domestic violence, but I know the work isn't done. I know that I push all of you on this item, and it's something that I know that you all feel very passionate about, and so I know that when I push you maybe to an edge on asking you for this or for certain statistics or data, it's all with the intention of making sure that our community is safer. And I know that you stand with me on those items, and it's never meant to be a source of criticism or being critical of our police department. It really is with the intention of making sure that our survivors receive the best interaction that possible when something just so terrible is happening in their lives, and with the level of stress that's going on with all of us. And so I appreciate your responses, your openness, and your willingness to continue to listen to all the input. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a note before you go, Councilmember Carrasco, I believe we're going to lose Vice Mayor Jones and Councilmember Jimenez just before 4 o'clock. And so we'll have a quorum if the three of us can remain, but we do have one more item after this. Okay, Councilmember Carrasco.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll make mine brief because, this is, Councilmember Arenas has spoken at length on this, and I could just easily say ditto, but it's such a critical issue, especially as we're sheltering in place, and our families are sometimes left without those safety nets that were just naturally built in. Children going to school, women who had extended support systems suddenly were isolated. The governor just instituted another curfew for the next month. So, if you're not an essential worker, now you're stuck with your perpetrator starting at 10 o'clock for sure. And I don't know if the stats have changed much since I was in the world of domestic violence, working with families who were suffering from the power and control wheel. But we saw that a rise in DV had something to do with even the sun going down suddenly, and maybe that's just because people are home on the natural in the evenings and tensions rise, and you're trying to put kids to bed, people are hungry, people are cranky, and then people lose their ability to control their self. So I see on page 4 of 9 of this report, you have domestic violence occurrence, and you have it broken down in this. And so are we just, I want to just, I guess, I don't know if this is exactly what Councilmember Arenas was alluding to, because I'm looking also at the previous item with the report that you had on the different categories of rape. It had rape, domestic rape, spousal rape, and then it had sodomy. And so when you break down those numbers, is it for the purposes just to give us a better dig into what the issues are, and how the incidents are playing out? And I want to ask if rape falls under domestic violence as well. Are those numbers being counted in there, or is that a completely different number count?
Steve, did you want to address that, or do you want me to?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was muted. Or when you're talking about the rape, sodomy, spousal rape, are you talking about the presentation from today for domestic violence?
Yeah, it was it was the previous, and I'm sorry because I wanted to take this. I wanted to just use both of these reports as a comparison. That was from the previous item, and it was, I think,
the previous item I presented on.
Yeah, it was page 6.
Okay.
page 6.
Yeah.
So that goes into like different categories. And then now that I'm looking at the domestic violence one on page 4 of this report, that also gets split up into the different subcategories. What I just want to know is if I were a San Jose State student, or I was doing some statistical work from Stanford, and I come up to the stats for the next largest metropolitan city, San Jose. When I look at rape or when I look at domestic violence, am I looking at numbers that overlap, or are those completely two separate categories? That's one question.
Okay, so let me address that one question, and then we'll get to the sub questions. When you ask about rape in the city of San Jose, we have a tremendous number of subcategories. You have spousal rape, you have rape against a minor, you have based on relationship and age, and everyone in the entire country reports out a single definition of rape to the Uniform Crime Reports, regardless of all the subcategories. Rape is defined in Uniform Crime Reports, and we report it out to them based on that definition, and that's the statistic that you see.
Okay.
So while the certain studies and certain comparisons can break it down even further into what that number means,
Yeah.
if you say there was 100 rapes reported to UCR, that could be any fraction and divided any way between all these subcategories, but the 100 gets reported out.
Okay. Okay, good. So that definitely answers part of my question. So that's the subcategories of rape. So anybody who wants to look up rape can find a bulk number without the subcategories. And then if they wanted to dive in deeper, then of course we have them broken down, and each jurisdiction sounds like they do their own subcategory. So the second question is, when I look at the numbers of domestic violence, does domestic violence, let's just say violence against women, does violence against women include the rape numbers?
When you define something based on UCR reporting, we are not defining rape again as a second report under domestic violence. So when we report out domestic violence, say 273.5 of the penal code, the domestic violence with injury, we're reporting that out in and of itself, and not, we're not double reporting, I should say.
So and that was part of my concerns on Tuesday, was that when we see the numbers of domestic violence, I think they're woefully underreported, and not I'm not putting any blame here, because if there's categories that are set up so that there's some sort of consistency throughout the different jurisdictions, I can understand that. But for me, it would be helpful to be able to say, look, these are the numbers that are categorized as domestic violence, but here are also the numbers that are categorized as rape, because I consider that an assault on women, a crime against women and children, and a crime against now a person who has to become a survivor of that incident. And so I've never really been very clear, and that was probably my own mishap. So I apologize if I haven't asked this question or if I didn't read into it. But I didn't know if they were being overlapped, if they were being included, or if they were two completely separate categories or separate issues. But domestic violence to me encompasses rape, but it sounds like the way that we're reporting it, they're two completely separate items.
Well, not necessarily.
Councilmember Carrasco, if I can just add in here, Steve, give me a second. Just so you know, and you're absolutely correct when it comes to UCR reporting out on it. One change that we're going to see here shortly is when NIBRS is put in effect. So when we report out in UCR, it is the highest crime category that is captured. So if you put it in perspective of a assault with a deadly weapon, and let's say they were in a stolen vehicle, the stolen vehicle would actually drop off of the UCR category, and it would capture the assault with a deadly weapon portion of it, and that's how UCR gets reported out. When we go and the entire state is going to NIBRS, once we do that, it'll actually separate those crimes out. So we will see here in the near future, a lot of these crimes actually, or a lot of these offenses starting to go up in numbers. And that is because each specific charged crime, when it on its face, when we pull those numbers, all those numbers are going to end up showing up in a report.
Okay.
And
So
Council,
I just want to, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
sorry, Councilmember, I have one thing to add on to that, in addition to what Chief Tyndall said. So the report that I made today and the statistics that were used in my report, the memo, and then in the slideshow today, what I used were occurrences. So our statistics can be captured in incidents or occurrences. And like the chief said, that incident where there was the robbery and the stolen vehicle or whatever example he used, it would only get captured as the most serious crime. What I've tried to do in the domestic violence instances that I gave today is not use incidents, but actually use occurrences. And in that example, one incident could have more than one occurrence. For example, if the suspect went and violated a restraining order and committed an assault against his partner, then that's two occurrences according to the statistics I gave you today. And what I worked with our crime analysis unit to do was give us the best numbers. Like the chief said, when we go to NIBRS, I think this is going to clear itself up, but we are attempting to move ahead of the curve and give you the most accurate numbers we can by, in this report today, giving you occurrences and not incidents to try to give you the most complete picture possible.
And so as these reporting changes happen, can we make sure that in the presentation that we put a side note, a footnote, a header or something, you know, these numbers have changed or they look this way, and give it a caveat, something that we know that triggers our memory bank, because you know, you deal with this on a daily basis. So this is going to this is your Bible, right? That you live and work by. For us, you know, my memory has to be triggered in terms of how the reporting changed and how that had an impact on the numbers. At the end of the day, what I'm looking for is when I go and advocate for funding or for services, when I go and advocate for changes in different systems that we're working with, maybe it's a school district or the county or what have you, at the end of the day, all I'm looking for is, what are my numbers? Did they go up? Did they go down? You know, and we can break them down into a million different categories, which is, I think, great if you're needing that kind of information. What I need is, look, my DV numbers just increased. We think it's because of this, or we estimate or we suspect because it's that, and our rape numbers have gone up. So collectively, crimes against women, total blah, blah, blah. And that's, you know, a 200% increase from what we've seen before. Because we can go ahead and shuffle them and find different criteria. It's going to change the way we interpret now data. And I don't ever want to lose a family that was not counted previously, that's now counted, or that's now not counted because it was counted before. You know, I mean, stats, right? It's, you know, you all remember that book from what, the 80s, you know, there's stats, and then there's more lies or something. Or no, there's lies, and then there's stats. And so it basically was the same, you know, it depends on how you interpret it. And so I just want to have accurate information when I go and I advocate, so that I can also support you in the good work that you're doing to support our families. What we do know is that this health crisis has just put everybody in an even more vulnerable situation. You know, people who don't want to come back to work, they're terrified of getting sick or getting their family sick or of dying. People who are willing to, you know, run into a burning building, literally, and drag even the cat out, right? Because this is what makes our communities, you know, feel a sense of healing. And so for me, it's how do I support you so that you have all the tools at your disposal so that we can truly make sure that our families are safe and that they are not being lost in the shuffle somewhere, especially when we're in isolation and now with a new curfew. So that's all I need, is just, I want, you know, that kind of information, and to be able to say to me, they changed because of this, and always trigger my memory bank with that. So with that, I'll yield, Chair, because I know we have one last item, and I don't know if you're going to have time while the rest of the crew is on board. But thank you so much to everybody. This work is hard. This work is very difficult. Finding individuals who are suffering from power and control and who escalate to violence is like finding sometimes a needle in a haystack. You don't hear about it until they report it or someone else reaches out. Sometimes it's too late at that point, and so we don't want to see tragedies like that. But I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank also my council colleagues, because they've been on board making sure that our women and children are safe throughout the city and throughout the county. And so I'm just very appreciative that I have a group of colleagues that find this to be the priority just as much as I've felt it from day one when I took office.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly not too much more to be added after Councilmember Arenas and Carrasco been leading the charge on this effort. And I think just the focus on prevention is really key here. It's very similar to the last discussion in regards to traffic enforcement. And I think the opportunities that we have to try and prevent some of these things from happening. Clearly, traffic enforcement, one type of crime, when you're talking about domestic violence, violence against women, sexual assaults, I think, where we can actually be truly effective in prevention is going to make all the difference, because we can continue to put in officers, investigators, and address these crimes after they happen. But if we can do more to prevent them, certainly I think that's where we can hit a benefit. And so where I think for me, and apologize, I, like Councilmember Arenas, now have one that's up and about. So where I think for me is just important that we continue that effort, we continue our partnerships with our nonprofit providers that are out there, right, are the experts in doing that prevention work. And I think we certainly have come a long way over the last couple of years. So I'm just appreciative of that and the leadership from Councilmember Arenas and Carrasco on this committee and on this council. So with that, I don't know if we have a motion to accept the annual report.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and then we can do a roll call vote.
Arenas?
Yes.
Jones?
Aye.
Roscoe?
Aye.
Jimenez? Peralez?
Aye.
Jimenez, I see him still in the list. Okay, so I'm going to mark absent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now go to our final item, which is item D3, our Personal Care Business Compliance Initiative Follow-Up Report.
Councilman Peralez, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Lieutenant Monsieur.
And can you see my presentation?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. It should be up.
I am not seeing it. I don't know if anybody else is.
Not seeing it.
Nope, nobody's. Oh,
There we go.
okay. It is coming up now.
Okay, great. Okay, so I am Lieutenant Paul Messier. I am the commander of the Special Investigations Unit. With me today is Sergeant Rick Galea, and I will be presenting on the Personal Care Business Compliance Initiative Follow-Up Report. So to give you a kind of a snapshot of what we've been doing over the last 3 years, and this will now be the third year that I've presented on this matter, it kind of began in 2017 and 18 when the Vice Unit implemented a new program and a new concept called the Landlord Education Program. And it was very successful at the time. This initiative was number 10 on the priority list with the City Council. So we had a very successful year in shutting down about 107 illicit massage businesses. We then moving to 2018 and 19, we shut down 79 using the same program. However, we implemented some new best practices that were more victim centric, and that was that we have advocates respond during our covert operations to actually make contact with the survivors and offer services. Additionally, we do not arrest workers because we don't know if they are in fact a survivor. So another reason why we do not do that is we want to reduce the stress level and we want to encourage disclosure. So in addition to that, we provide brochures. These brochures are provided by Aki. They come in different languages. We bring them with us. And we do that because if a survivor does not want to disclose, then and there, they at least have the information to disclose at a later time. And those brochures have the 24-hour hotline. They have additional information about human trafficking, and it will get them the services they need. So additionally, we started collaborating with Community Solutions as well as the South Bay Coalition to end human trafficking. So moving to this year, we rolled that model into exactly what we were doing this year. We shut down an additional 26 illicit massage businesses, bringing our total closures over the last 3 years to 212. We had an interesting occurrence this year that I will get into in a little bit in my presentation, but we ended up adding residential brothels to our program. So again, our program this year was a collaborative effort with the city attorney, with code enforcement. We continued to conduct covert investigations, although our efforts were very limited due to COVID-19 and other urgent priorities that our unit was facing. We continued with the landlord education program. And real quick, the landlord education program is simple. It's threefold. We inform landlords of possible illegal activity occurring on their properties. We educate them about human trafficking, and then we motivate them to terminate or not renew the lease of an illicit massage business. And that program has been very successful. And then of course, we're partnering, as I said, with Community Solutions, as well as the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking, and that's Kim Gutierrez and Sharon Danoa. So this is just a snapshot of our efforts. We last reported that we had identified 246 illicit massage businesses and we shut down about 186 of them. This year, 10 additional illicit massage businesses were identified and 26 were closed. So over the last 3 years, in total, we've identified 256 I call them IMBs, illicit massage businesses, and we've gotten out about 212 of them. That's about 82% from vice-related efforts. So what this pie chart indicates, in blue is the 212 that have been shut down, but there is an additional 44 that is broken down at the top here. So 38 of those we conducted a covert investigation and there was nothing illegal going on. There's one that we're expecting to close soon. And then there's 5 where no action has been taken yet. So what we did was, regarding these remaining 44, when the county issued the health order, we did an audit where we actually went to each of these locations. And interestingly enough, all of these businesses complied with the county health order and closed. So over the last year, on the left column, this was our vice-related efforts. We conducted 6 covert investigations and 7 landlord education meetings. And our code enforcement unit with the city conducted 93 inspections, 12 compliance orders, and issued 5 citations. So when somebody wants to open up a massage business in the city of San Jose, they have to apply for a permit with the police department. And that's what this graph indicates here. So you can see in 2018, there was a peak of applicants trying to get a permit to open up. And this is really when our programs started to take off. You can see that that number went down to 31 the following year. And then this year, there were only 9 application submissions. And we believe that was due to COVID-19. Obviously, nobody wants to open up a business if they can't open. So like reported in years past, as we're shutting down these illicit massage businesses, they try to get sneaky and they try to disguise what they really are. We had 2 of those this last year. One was Dan's gift shop over off Tully Road. We had another one that was a boutique shop that was over off of Bascom. So we were very quick to identify these 2 illegal businesses and get them shut down very quickly. So what I'd like to do now is talk about residential brothels. This was a new project for us. We knew they existed in the city. We knew the Light Task Force had worked them before. And it was something that our unit never really had dove into before to really see how bad this problem was. So after the 212 illicit massage businesses closed in commercial areas, combined with those 44 that closed because of the county health order, we began to notice a trend, and that was the advertisements for these commercial massage businesses basically disappeared. We then began to see a sharp increase of online escort ads directing customers to residential brothels. We also saw ads inside magazines directing people to residential brothels. To corroborate that further, we began to receive tips from the community regarding residential brothels in residences, in apartments, as well as single family homes. So these factors really led us to believe that the commercial sex industry was transitioning into residential areas. And of course, they were doing this to circumvent the county health order and to be able to continue to operate. So what we decided to do was work collaboratively with our human trafficking unit to try and address this issue. And one of the ways we did that was we created a shared folder and we compiled a master list of all the residential brothels that we knew about in the city. So we identified 48 residential brothels, and what this pie chart indicates here is just how many are in condos, how many are in single family homes, and then how many are in apartments. And as you can see, the majority of our residential brothels, 48%, are in apartments. And there's a reason why that is. Apartments are very easy to rent. You basically need good credit and an ID card. Usually apartment managers are very motivated to rent an apartment. You can rent multiple units at once. So if you're a trafficker, You can multiply your profits by having multiple apartments within the same unit. If one apartment gets shut down either because of a police action or the management is approaching you because of complaints, it's very easy to move human trafficking victims into another apartment to keep your operation up and running. Additionally, heavy pedestrian traffic and vehicle traffic is more noticeable in a residential neighborhood. In a very large apartment complex, it's pretty common. So it's not as suspicious to operate. And not only that, it's very difficult. It's definitely more challenging for the police department to work covert operations in high-rise apartment complexes with long corridors. And a lot of these units are just that. So a majority of our apartment brothels are operating in the Golden Triangle. So the Golden Triangle is the area in between 237, 101, and 880. And this isn't a coincidence that the majority are right on North First Street in this corridor here, because you have very good freeway access. You have Bay 101 and Matrix casinos close by. And with a majority of our city's high-tech industry in this area, you have a wealthy customer base. So this is why we see the majority of our apartment brothels in the city in this specific area. So here's the results of our enforcement efforts this year. And like I said before, it was very challenging because of COVID-19. We relied heavily on the landlord education program because of that. But of the 48 residential brothels that we identified, 20 landlord education meetings were conducted and 3 search warrants were served. And we shut down 20 residential brothels. 17 were shut down with the landlord education program. 3 were shut down from search warrants. And again, we worked closely with our human trafficking unit regarding that. 28 residential brothels remain open right now, and most are apartment brothels. Regarding the 3 search warrants that were conducted, 6 human trafficking survivors were recovered in those operations. 4 exploiters were arrested. $25,000 was seized, a vehicle, as well as 3 ATM machines. So this pin map here is our pre-enforcement. This is what it looked like. And as you can see in the top of the screen, that is the heavy clustering of those apartment brothels off of North First Street. The rest are kind of scattered around the city, but District 4 has that cluster up top there. After our enforcement efforts were completed, this is what it looks like now. And these are the remaining 28, and up top where that cluster was, we still have about 16 apartment brothels in that location. So what we did is we decided that our best practices that we implemented for commercial brothels, massage parlors, we implemented to residential brothels. So if an operation like a search warrant is going to be conducted at a residential brothel, we are going to have our advocates there to bring services to those survivors. Again, if our advocates cannot be there for whatever reason, we are providing those brochures I was talking about earlier to those survivors. We are not arresting anybody at these specific locations who is working there as a sex worker, because again, They could be a human trafficking victim, and we just do not want to do that. And we want to bring down the tensions in the room to encourage disclosure. And then the last part is our regional information sharing component. So the Vice unit conducted outreach, and this is something that we talked about last year. We conducted outreach to all the other 8 police agencies in Santa Clara County regarding LEAP, which is our regional law enforcement database, to allow for countywide information sharing regarding illicit massage businesses, and we've now included apartment brothels. So all Santa Clara County police agencies were contacted. They were educated about the benefits of using LEAP, and they were instructed how to migrate their information, their intelligence that they gather, and get it into LEAP. So every agency, I'm happy to report, was very agreeable to start using LEAP to push out their intelligence. And what this does is it helps us identify larger human trafficking networks. So if there is a brothel owner who is contacted in San Jose and then tries to relocate to another jurisdiction, if somebody runs that person's name, they will be able to see that they used to be here, and they will be able to contact us for additional information. Additionally, we presented at the regional Bay Area human trafficking meeting, which included agencies from outside Santa Clara County, on the benefits of using LEAP, because it's not just Santa Clara County. There's many other agencies that participate in that database. So what I want to do is just talk about a little bit about our partnership with the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking. So again, we worked with Sharon Denoa on that, and she's the director of strategic deployment there. And we have had ongoing discussions regarding regional approaches to address this kind of new residential brothel issue. And I think it's going to continue to be an issue as long as this county health order mandatory shutdown goes on. They're going to continue to operate in these apartments, and I'm sure this is an issue in other jurisdictions as well. So some of the regional approaches that we have been discussing, and something that we're already doing, is adding that brothel information into LEAP, meeting with apartment managers and homeowners associations to educate them about human trafficking, and to establish agreed upon eviction protocols. So what I'd like to do in conclusion here, before I get into this, I just want to say that these 28 brothels that remain right now are really our unit's highest priority. We want to get those brothels shut down, and we want to get services in there for those survivors. It is very difficult for us to gain cooperation from these apartment managers. They want definitive proof that there is criminal activity going on. And we found that our landlord education program just did not work well with apartments. You're dealing with apartment managers that are renting hundreds of units. There is not a vested interest. It's not like a sole property owner that owns a home that is very interested and motivated in what is going on at their property. You're dealing with apartment managers. They want to rent as many apartments as they can. And we've even had them tell us that they thought they were renting to somebody that was setting up residential brothels, but their internal policies prohibited them from not renting those apartments to that person. So it really is challenging to shut these residential brothels down. And the bottom line is that we need to collect sufficient evidence to get search warrants to shut them down. Getting search warrants versus the landlord education program, it's a very time-consuming process. We need probable cause to do that. But it's something that we're planning on doing, and it's going to be a big push as we get into 2021 to make that happen. So in conclusion, I really feel that this year our program was continued to be very successful. We shut down over 40% of the residential brothels in the city. We're going to continue to use our current program toward illicit massage businesses as they start to reopen as we get out of COVID, as well as our residential brothels. And we're going to use those implemented best practices that have been working very well. And we of course have a great relationship with our nonprofit partners, and we're going to continue to work with them to come up with creative ideas to address these issues. And at this point, I'll open it up for any questions.
Great, thank you very much for that presentation. Don't see any speakers from the public, so we'll go over to my colleagues. I don't see any hands raised. So I will start it off. First off, I appreciate the progress. I would agree with you. I think we're still seeing a lot of success here. And I think that's attributed to the work that you all have been doing, and obviously the encouragement from this committee and our council, and the partnership that we've had as well to lend support to survivors. I think that just the whole package has come together. I think unfortunate in regards to these brothels, and what we're seeing is a new means for these illegal sex workers to be taking up different types of locations. And I think, as you pointed out, it's unfortunate as well that our landlord education program is not successful with the apartment complex owners or property managers. And so I would be interested, maybe as you go through the next several months and you're working on the search warrants, I do think that it would be beneficial to see if there is some change we can implement, or maybe something we could do that would help specifically the landlord education, but maybe something that puts a little bit more pressure specifically for residential. And I think as well, I think we can put some thought into it to see if if that is something we can provide some assistance in. I did want to bring up one issue, because I think for the most part everything here very positive, and look forward to you reporting back next year, and hopefully we can get a number of those brothels as well addressed. But the concern that I had, and this came up in a memorandum submitted yesterday to the Rules Committee by Councilmember Arenas and the mayor, in regards to a code enforcement worker that we had here at the city, William Gary, who I believe was working on a number of these cases for us. And I just wanted to see if that was the case. I do know he worked on some of them, but I don't know how many of them significantly from that standpoint of code enforcement. And then any concerns that we may have because of the alleged charges against him.
Yeah, let me start off by saying that, and I think I can speak for the whole police department here, we were absolutely shocked and disgusted when we heard about the charges against William Jerry. But because there is currently an open sexual assault investigation going on, I would rather not speak on that issue. All of those questions that you have are going to be answered as the investigation continues, and it is continuing. And I would agree, there definitely needs to be a deep dive into what was going on. But because that investigation is still continuing, I can't speak to it.
And I just want to reassure the committee that the city manager and I are working with the department to make any changes that are needed to ensure something like this does not happen again?
Yeah, I think that, I certainly think those are givens, and I trust the process that we're going through to as well prosecute this individual and try to ensure it doesn't happen again. What I'm concerned about is really the amount of work that we put in the last couple of years, and is any of that in jeopardy, right, because of his involvement. And so maybe Lieutenant Messier, if there's information, at least you could share offline. I would be interested, number one, in the number of cases that he was involved in, where we were able to shut down some of these illicit massage parlors, and then just to get an understanding, maybe from our city attorney's office, on what may be in jeopardy if if ultimately these charges do hold, and then just a follow up. So I'll take those answers offline. I do think it's rather extremely unfortunate. And absolutely appreciate our assistant city manager's response on this is something clearly none of us want to see happen again. Okay, if we can get a motion to approve the report.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion from Councilmember Carrasco. I'll second, but we will need the three of us to vote. So hopefully we can get Councilmember Aranas.
And Chair, I apologize. I thought I had raised my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I apologize. Go ahead. My apologies.
No worries. Okay, so hold on, Mama. Sorry. So I also want to just commend the Vice Unit for the work that they have been doing around closing up almost 200 illegal massage businesses, and I know that last year there was a cluster of them in my district around Tully and Quimby, and then I see that there's still, as the trend has moved into residential apartment condos and homes, I still see some dots in my district. And so I'm guessing that the 28 that are left are in different, I guess, in different stages of being processed for closure, is what I'm guessing. Correct?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. We are actively working on shutting all of these down, and we plan to get to every one of them.
Perfect, perfect. So I heard that there's some, I guess, some housing policies that landlords are careful not to violate. And I wonder, have we worked with our housing department? I see Jorge. With our housing department, or of course with our city attorneys, to figure out how we can get to these folks, or how we can help our landlords or property managers address this as they think that this is coming on to their property.
Yeah, so we work very closely with the city attorney. We haven't reached out to housing on this matter. Getting cooperation from single family home property owners is not a problem. If it is, we can do a nuisance abatement with the city attorney to address those issues. Where we're having problems is getting buy-in from these very large, there's probably 1,000 units at some of these ones off of North First Street, getting cooperation from them because they have their own lawyers, they have their own corporate policies. People are skittish because of the eviction moratorium that's going on. And they want definitive proof that there is illegal activity going on in there. Getting them that definitive proof can be challenging because of how these apartments are geographically located within that complex. It's very difficult for us to surveil what's going on when something's on the 6th floor in the middle of a 100-yard hallway. and you have people coming and going, it's very easy to do that in a residential neighborhood, very challenging in a large apartment complex. So they want as much evidence as we could possibly give them. And the bottom line is, we need to get search warrants. We need to actually, and they've told us, if you do a search warrant, you can verify what's going on in there, we will evict. So what I'd like to do though, because our program has really been so successful because of that landlord education component, what I want to do is meet with these property managers. And I actually am planning on inviting our advocates to come with us and coming up with a mutually agreeable policy to get these suspected illicit massage businesses out. And what makes it challenging is a lot of these traffickers have rented multiple units. So we shut one down, it's like whack-a-mole. Now they're in another unit on a different floor. So they're not very forthcoming about wanting to give us information. And they have not been very cooperative with us as we're trying to solve these issues. So again, what I'd like to do is try to meet with them, come up with a mutually acceptable policy where if we, for instance, stop a couple customers leaving and they admit that it's going on, and we can document that in a police report and give them the case number, would that be enough for them to evict? Now, we'll still do search warrants because our program has always had that covert component, but I want to get the landlord education program working with these apartments, and I think we can do it. We just need to get the right people in the room and come up with a mutually agreeable policy.
Got it. Have you, without giving everything away, I mean, I love that you're continuing to think outside the box and try to figure out how you can get the landlords on your side. I'm guessing as you close one apartment up, or close that brothel out in that particular apartment, have we thought about maybe moving in and doing surveillance through some of those unoccupied apartments? I think right now there's a lot of people hurting, and so I'm guessing there's some vacancy allowing.
Yeah, you're reading my mind. We have all kinds of ideas and techniques that we can use, and we are going to use them. That's one of several ideas that we are brainstorming right now.
Wonderful. The other recommendation I was thinking, since I know that we thought about this when it seems like not like a year ago, but anyways, from the last report that we received on this, to include landlord education, and that seems effective. How about also involving maybe some of the residents, and maybe not and asking them for their cooperation and anonymous reporting, like, I don't know, a little half sheet. This is how you can anonymously report any activity that you see, without bringing them into the picture too much, and safely from a distance reporting things that they may observe.
I'm just gonna, before you I'm gonna interject real quick. We may lose, sorry, got my son here too. We may lose Councilmember Carrasco shortly. And so I just wanted to see if we could try to get to at least the approval of the motion, and if there's anything urgent that we can follow up on, I think we can continue that, but
okay, so move to approve.
We had a motion and a second. Councilmember Carrasco moved it, and I did second it.
So I do have a couple of more questions, and it has to do with whether there were minors involved in any of the situations that you've closed in person, and not, of course, not the administrative ones. And if there were any children on site. I can take my questions offline if that helps, or we can vote chair, and then I can continue with my questions. Would that be appropriate?
I'm okay with it. I'll double check with our city attorney if that's possible.
You can receive information, additional information, but you can't, so you can ask questions, just the two of you.
Great, we will do that then. So yeah, if we can go ahead and do the roll call vote, and then we can continue on a little bit with the conversation, and then we'll finish up with open forum.
Arenas?
Yes.
I have Jones absent. Carrasco?
Yes.
Jimenez absent. Peralez?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. So the question I had were about minors, and were any minors involved in any of the stings or any of the closures?
No minors were involved.
And no children present?
No children present.
Well, that's really good to hear. Which of the community advocates go with you during there was 3 search warrants that you did. Of the 6 identified survivors, how many were referred to community advocates?
Well, the advocates were there, so services were offered to all of them. I actually called Brian Anderson of the commander of our human trafficking unit, because I wanted to find out if any of them actually followed up to actually get services, and he said he would not know that information because it is confidential.
Got it. Okay. And this is between, I think, YWCA, Community Solutions, and I think Aki?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And the other piece that I had was around, I just want to say, actually, I want to thank Councilmember Peralez. I know that this was a priority. You had this, you pushed this forward in priority setting. I really appreciate it. I know this adds to the quality of life of our community and our businesses, and it impacts our businesses in the way that people interact in our particular neighborhoods, or don't. They are discouraged from going to certain parts of our districts because they know that this illicit going on in those particular businesses, and so that it could really repel folks from engaging with other small businesses around illicit massage parlors. And so I just want to thank you for that leadership and for continuing to support this. Back then we had Deputy Chief Williams, and one of the he had shared with us, one of the things that he really wanted to see move forward was the LEAP database and the sharing of the database. And so I wanted to know, and I was really happy to hear that this was really happening. There was more information being input into the database, as well as not just ourselves. This doesn't help us at all solve any crimes if it's just us in the database, but having other regions. How many other regions that we know, because we know that there's a bit of a trend around the Bay Area in how Alameda County and those the human trafficking loop happens, are the regions that most impact us in putting the right type of data, and I mean like investigative information. One is how many regions, I guess, are inputting, and are they the regions that we actually, or the jurisdictions that make the most sense for us, because we know we have a lot of arrest around Alameda residents when it has to do with human trafficking and prostitution stings. And are those the folks that are inputting information into that LEAP database? And are they also putting in information, not just names and dates, but actual investigative information that could help us?
Right. So we presented at that regional Bay Area human trafficking meeting, which included agencies from outside Santa Clara County, and it was some of the agencies that you're talking about in the Alameda County that were there. And we spoke about the benefits of using LEAP, who to contact to migrate that information in. Now, whether or not they are choosing to use it is something that I don't know, but I explained to them the benefits of why it should be used and how we can basically connect the dots between these crime networks, which can really help solve these cases. So as far as whether or not they're actually doing it, I don't know. And regarding the agencies in our own county, I had the same conversation with them, and I really felt that they were all very interested in using it. So I'm confident that they are, but I don't know if they are. That is probably needs to be a follow-up conversation that needs to maybe can be reported on next time we discuss this.
That would be really important. I think I'm glad that you stress how important it is, because as we know that there's a pattern to these types of crimes that happen in our Bay Area, and if you follow it, it just goes all the way, just makes a whole loop, right? But we can't close this loop if we don't have all the information, and we have a database that could really create some impact, especially when we don't have enough resources, when we don't have enough officers to invest in all of these crimes, and the information can really help us. And so I really hope that this is something that we can advocate in this upcoming year, that not only are we making good use of it, but that regionally, especially some of those jurisdictions that really impact us, are also, at the very least, I think, Alameda County, for crying out loud, we get a lot of your folks down here, input some of that information so that we can, connect the dots, or have two jurisdictions where we really advocate for them to and make, I don't know, have an MOU, for crying out loud, whatever it is that can really propel us to use this tool in a more effective way. So I was happy to see that we haven't lost sight of it, that it's still there. I think we still need to continue to explain the usefulness of it. I'm glad, Lieutenant, that you're continuing to reinforce that. Now we need to continue to make next steps. And I wonder, do you think that we can make a next step with one jurisdiction in this upcoming year, that we can have some kind of agreement that we would both submit or input a certain level of information? Yeah,
and also keep in mind that all CAD data will get migrated into LEAP. So for example, if a human trafficking unit in Oakland arrests a pimp, that arrest information will go into LEAP. The kind of information that we are putting into LEAP is information that CAD would probably miss, which is that landlord education intel. So we know that it was a brothel. We got the name of the person that was on the lease, but that person wasn't arrested, they were evicted. So that information wouldn't go into LEAP, but we are pushing it in because we're doing a separate migration of that intel. But you should know that every department that's part of LEAP does an annual migration of information from their CAD into LEAP. So I do think if they are arresting traffickers in Oakland, that information is automatically in LEAP.
Right. But some of this information, like the landlords who shut down, or the folks who are cooperating with us, we can't close that loop. And we saw some of them, actually some of the migration of the human trafficking work and the illicit massage parlors going to Milpitas last year, I think it was. Now we have it back into our own backyard in the way that you've explained it this year. I know it's like a cat and mouse game. I just think that there's sometimes systems can help us. I know a lot of the times they help us trip us up and create a lot more work. I think this is such difficult work to do that it's worth maybe investing just one more step towards making that tool more effective. And so whatever we can do to make that, I would just recommend that we proactively do that this upcoming year, and that you don't find yourself once again, chasing these illicit massage parlors somewhere else. And my ultimate fear is that they go so underground that we're not able to connect with any of those survivors, and that there's might be some level of children participating and minors participating for a really long time, and that we don't capture that kind of illicit activity. So thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being willing to take that motion and continue the conversation as well. I think it's important. And in fact, we're going to add another annual update to the work plan for next year, a year from now. So just to give you a heads up for that, Lieutenant Messier, and it's been great to have you providing the update year over year. I don't know if you'll still be here with us next year. You won't, no. So already answered it for me.
I'm actually retiring in January.
All right, well.
So I will say this, I will make sure my replacement knows what he needs to do.
Motion to deny.
Well, it's been great to have consistency with you the last 3 years, especially as we've implemented this, really a new effort and resurgence in our, addressing these crimes, and then the shift that we've had in the focus on the survivors, right? And so I think it's been great, and your leadership has been terrific. Councilmember Arenas spoke about it on the last item, but I think even just hearing police officers utilizing I think proper terminology to demonstrate their extensive knowledge of what's going on and their sensitivity to it, I think is important. And you have certainly helped lead through this. And so, yeah, we look forward to whoever your replacement is in providing that report to us next year. And now we'll go to our open forum to end it up. So we have caller 5140 and then Blair Beekman.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the city, the police department in general, takes a lot of permit fees from these massage parlors for years and years. And I was just looking it up. Those fees are thousands of dollars. So I want to say the real pimps is our SJPD and that wonderful person that you guys hired to do the inspections. What a real beauty he was, along with the pedophiles you guys have hired, the drunks, the people who don't arrest police officers for drunk driving and let them go. Then you got the guy who did tax evasion and money laundering. You guys hired the biggest losers ever. I would be embarrassed if I was a San Jose police officer of who you hire, who you work with, and what your priorities are. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. You are the worst police department in the entire nation, I think. And highly paid, by the way. You guys still cry about how you don't make the money that other people do because you don't do anything. You know, what, you go around to massage parlors, you charge them a bunch of money, and then you have a guy rape people who are there. You guys need to be held accountable for this stuff, especially the guy who did tax evasion and money laundering. Nobody knew that guy had a security company. I find that very hard to believe. I love how you guys let DAs and other cops off for drunk driving, even when it's felony drunk driving. They get off of like community service. What about the regular people? Oh, that's right. You guys like to stake out Brian and Cherry, and if someone rolls through a stop sign, you hit them with a fat fine around Christmas and Thanksgiving. You guys are pathetic. You know what? Every bad thing that happens to San Jose PD is well deserved. I cannot even tell you how horrible you guys are. I just did, I guess. You know what? Good riddance.
Thank you. Now Blair Beekman.
Hi, from my beginning public comment way in the beginning of the meeting today, I wanted to also remind with all the COVID issues to think about, to think about federal funding. I've been learning to say that, and how federal funding can really be of help at the state level, and all the good, state financing programs that have been working to be created over the past year can really offer a lot of help into 2021. And we're going to need it. There's going to be a lot of questions about, I guess, foreclosure issues and new recession questions that, it can really help with community harmony issues, is what we're all trying to address right now in this meeting today. The VTA has made their efforts towards that. So thanks for that. I thought I'd just mention that here. To offer a few words, as it seems we may be headed towards a lame duck presidency, a reminder that the current President Donald Trump just fired a very decent-minded defense secretary. I think it really needs to be noted by local government bureaucracies at this time that fairly large catastrophic events locally, nationally, and internationally of the past 20 years often take place within the early transition and change of a presidential administration. And on a personal note, I wanted to offer, I have serious reservations about the new president-elect Joe Biden wanting to offer the National Defense Secretary job to Michelle Flournoy. She has a very checkered past, and I think we need someone in that position who works towards ideas of peace. And we're at a time to internationally talk about how to end war. And that's a lot to work for. And I hope President-elect Biden will work toward those goals. Thank you.
Thanks, Blair. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody for next week. Meeting's adjourned.